Chapter 984. Even when facing Kazak and the other demon leaders on Mount Hyjal, Brock had never retreated. He was undoubtedly a hero. When facing Kazak and the twin demon lords, he had been ordered to stop the demon commandos who were trying to help their leaders. At that time, he had wielded his warhammer and fought bravely. When his last comrade was split in half by a gargoyle before reinforcements could arrive, he had avenged his comrade by smashing the gargoyle with his hammer. Then there was only silence all around. When Sal arrived with his army, Brock's figure, covered in scars and standing alone in a pool of blood, had left a deep impression on Sal. In Sal's opinion, Brock's name should be almost as respectable as his own. His early exit from the battle against the Arch-Herons had ruined what should have been a perfect honor. However, Sal had chosen him not only because of his strength and experience. More importantly, Sal knew Brock's loyalty. Sal couldn't send an army for this kind of mission that involved traveling through time and space. He needed a confidant who was strong enough to complete this mission for him. That should have been the case, but a fellow who gave Sal a headache appeared. A burly and ferocious figure rushed into Sal's tent and picked up Nozdorma's dragon scale without a word. Then he passed the test in just 10 seconds. Sal's mouth was full of bitterness. For the sake of my ancestors, don't make things difficult for me. Grom Hellscream. Lord Hell panted heavily. He didn't look at Sal, but instead looked at the elf-looking Krasis. I heard that Duque will go too. When Krasis said the word yes, Sal's head hurt. Then I'll go too. Lord Hell was resolute and unquestionable. The tribe needs you more, Sal tried to explain. What do you need me to do? Kill those demons who are running around like frightened rabbits? Or kill Arthas for the humans' revenge? I heard that the Alliance cut Arthas in half at the waist last time. Grom's voice grew louder. Grom, don't forget that you're the chief of the Warsong clan. Grom slapped his chest with a loud bam. I am first and foremost a warrior, and I am an old warrior. I've lived longer than my father and my grandfather combined. In the tribe, a guy of my age would have died many times already. Do you want me to watch Duque go on a dangerous mission, and then accidentally die in the mission? Do you want me to go see the ancestors with regret that I owe Duque my life? I don't want to die owing a human a favor, even if he is a hero worthy of respect. Grom's words made so much sense that Sal was speechless. From Draenor to Azeroth, because of the war and the harsh environment, the infant mortality rate had always been high. Although there were no official statistics, it was an indisputable fact that the average age of beastmen rarely exceeded 30 years old. Most of the orcs who had lived for a long time were shamans who did not need to go to the battlefield. Whether it was Brock or Grom, they were like living fossils who had experienced the Draenei War, the First and Second Battle of the Dark Portal, the Dalajan War against the Scourge, and the Battle of Mount Hyjal. It was a miracle. Even the strongest warrior of the tribe, Grom Hellscream, was no longer young. He was 50 years old this year. 50 years old. This was an extremely ridiculous age for an orc warrior. Sal sighed. Sal, don't try to persuade me. If my son is still alive, he'll be in his 20s. Other than Duque's kindness, I have no regrets in this life. At this moment, Brock took a step forward. Sal noticed that Brock's fists were clenched even tighter. Brock's blazing eyes told Sal that since he had passed this test, he was willing to fight until his death. Sal might not know that Brock was still suffering from a deep sense of guilt. This guilt had almost swallowed his soul. His comrades were all dead, and only Brock was left. He did not understand. At the same time, he felt very guilty. Why did he not die bravely with his comrades? To him, living was a kind of regret, even a kind of failure. Since then, he had been waiting for a chance to atone for his sins. To atone for his sins, even to die. Now, fate had finally given him this chance. How could he give up such a chance just because Grom's status was higher? The two orc heroes did not give an inch. This made it very difficult for Sal because Krasis had specified that only one person was needed. Suddenly, Nozdorma's voice came from the piece of scale. Then send one more orc. Ugh. Nozdorm. Your Majesty. Sal was shocked. It's okay. With my strength, it's not a big problem to send one more person back. At most, I'll torment Duque. Hee. Who asked him to give me so much trouble? At the same time, Back in front of the old Karazhan site on the upwind trail, Duque sneezed loudly. Haju dash. Did you catch a cold? The two queens turned around at the same time and looked at Duque strangely. No, I seem to feel a wave of malice from a certain dragon. Please don't mind it. It was desolate. After the explosion of Karazhan 15 years ago, this place had become a barren, scorched land. After the second battle at the Dark Portal, Duque had been busy opening up various black technology talents, and had no time to care about the natural environment here. Now that he had made contact with the Night Elves, Duque wondered if he could kidnap a druid or trick Alexstrasza into helping him after Karazhan returned, and turn this place into green mountains and clear waters. After all, if Karazhan became his lair again, the surroundings would be too ugly. At least the three Windrunner sisters would not like to come here. At this time, it seemed that the orcs had reached an agreement. Suddenly, a large piece of scorched land in front of Duque began to change color. In the blink of an eye, it turned into yellow quicksand. After a gust of wind blew the sand, a very small sand dragon appeared. It was a small-sized Nozdorm. Give me the spatial coordinates. A telepathic thought went straight into Duque's mind, and Duque gave it without hesitation. Then, a desert storm appeared out of nowhere and covered half of the valley. Even Queen Sheer, who did not know magic, felt that the space was shaking violently. It was as if a small hole had opened in the tightly sealed sky. In the sandstorm, as the sand blew, a clearer silhouette appeared. The huge tower, the covered bridge, the spire. That's right. It was Karazhan. When the huge mage tower returned to its original color in the vision of Duque and the others, the tall iron gate of the main gate was suddenly pulled shut, and a silver-haired figure shot out like an arrow. The next moment, Duque was hugged by a slim female figure. Chapter 985. Duque. Dragging the last syllable, she rushed over and buried her head in Duque's arms. When he raised his head, he saw a beautiful oval face with a pair of clear blue eyes. His nose was small and slightly upturned, and his mouth was brimming with a cheerful smile. When he stood up, his silver-white hair fell down to his waist. If it weren't for her pointed ears and slightly long eyebrows, others would have mistaken her for a human. Completely disregarding the others, Sasha leaned over and kissed him passionately. Ah, their mouths and tongues intertwined. Their noses were so close that their breaths mixed together, forming a small turbulence. The passion of reuniting after a long time was so hard to endure. If there weren't so many people watching, Duque might have pushed her down on the spot. Cough cough. Behind Sasha, a noble, gorgeous, and dignified female figure appeared. Naturally, it was Aurelia. Instead of joining in the fun, Aurelia gave Servanas a warm hug first. Sister. Yo, my Servanas, you're a queen now. Aurelia saw her second sister's crown. This is just a coincidence. The two sisters' figures overlapped. Then Aurelia sniffed hard and whispered into Servanas' ear. Yo, I didn't expect my arrogant second sister to fall for him too. Sister. What are you talking about? Queen Sylvanas panicked and wanted to deny it subconsciously. Who are you lying to? You have Duque scent all over you. I've been with Duque for more than 10 years. How can I not recognize him? Aurelia smiled mischievously. Impossible, I've washed myself clean. In the next second, Servanas realized that she had been tricked by her sister. She blushed and widened her eyes. Sister, you're lying to me. Aurelia's smile was like a blooming dahlia. The natural closeness of a big sister, similar to that of a mother, easily infected Servanas. Is that so? After Duke first returned to Azeroth, it was easy for a woman to let her imagination run wild as she waited in solitude. I have always been discussing. Second sister, if you are still single after 10 years, according to Duke's way of doing things, it's fine if nothing happens, but if something happens he will shock the world. How can you continue to resist his charm? After saying the word, I 3 times, Servanas was stunned and couldn't continue. The two sisters' smooth and warm faces rubbed against each other. Hugging her sister, Aurelia continued softly, You're so silly. You always think of finding a man, or finding a hero greater than Duque. But there's no hero greater than Duque in this world. It sounded exaggerated, but in the first and second battle of the Dark Portal, to Nazul's counterattack, to Lordaeron and Kuel Salas's resistance against natural disasters, and finally the magnificent battle of Mount Hyjal, Duque had become the real sun. The light on his body had firmly suppressed all other heroes. If it was 10 years ago, Sylvanas might have stubbornly refuted a few times, but now, she had no temper at all. Recalling the bits and pieces since they met, thinking of the steps of the sun-chasing king's court, the himself who pulled the bowstring in despair, and the heroic figure who arrived at the last moment, Sylvanas suddenly felt a little intoxicated. Sister. Sylvanas really didn't know whether it was because she felt wronged, or because she had taken such a long detour in more than 10 years, and finally couldn't escape from Duque's clutches. Anyway, Sylvanas burst into tears. Okay. Oh my. It's okay. Although it's a little difficult for three sisters to fall in love with the same man. Is it okay? It seems that we don't have to be separated anymore. In a trance, Sylvanas saw the figure of his deceased mother and his eldest sister. The years of separation, in addition to the pressure on her body, all burst out at once, resulting in her tears not stopping at all. While crying about her own longing, she also accused a certain Du's crimes as if she was making a snitch. On the other side, after Duque and Sasha finished their passionate kiss, they looked at the two sisters together with a smile. After waiting for Sylvanas to stop crying with great difficulty, Aurelia came over with one of her sisters in each hand, smiling like a flower. Duque, looks like you still couldn't help but make a move on second sister. Duque laughed a little embarrassedly. Also, Aurelia's beautiful eyes moved, and she glanced at Jaina, who was unconsciously standing in the outer circle beside them, not knowing whether to come closer or stay away. She lowered her head and played with her 10 tender fingers, but from time to time, she would sneak glances at them. Aurelia suddenly sighed. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 years have passed. Yes. Instead, it was Sylvanas who answered hurriedly. Then Jaina nodded awkwardly. She really didn't know what expression she should use to face Aurelia. Aurelia seemed to be sighing, but Duque, who was at the side, felt that there seemed to be a lot of information. That pair of bright eyes was just like when he first met her 15 years ago, filled with wisdom, kindness, and a hint of playfulness. This eldest sister of the Windrunner family slowly walked in front of Duque, her affectionate eyes filled with endless love and tolerance like the sea. Gently holding Duque's face, she gazed at this little man whom she both loved and hated. Sweet memories of the past also floated up in her mind, flashing through her eyes. Jaina, please come over for a moment. Aurelia pulled Jaina over, and then smiled brightly. Duque, no matter what happens in the future, you have to promise to treat all of us equally, okay? Understood. Don't forget to invite little sister Elugia to join our family feast later. Of course. From the eldest sister to the third sister, and then to Jaina, who automatically lined up last, Duque did not miss a single one. Looking at the blushing faces of the girls, Duque knew that he had passed the test. Then, Duque saw Tyrion Fordring and Gavinrad Doom, who were in a very good state of mind. After Ronan quickly explained the current situation to them, the two paladins seemed to be very active. I'm finally back. Since evil still exists in Lordaeron, it's time for me to leave as soon as possible. Tyrion saluted to Duque. Duque knew that this paladin, who was often called the Queen Mother by the players, had the most noble soul. Last time he was accidentally sent into the void with Lin Li, and stayed there for 10 years. This had already caused him great grievance. Now that his homeland was being ravaged by natural disasters, how could he sit still? Chapter 986. Duque smiled. If possible, eliminate the scourge in Lordaeron as soon as possible. I know you can't wait. I'll have Ronan send you to the front lines in the Western Plaguelands. Turallion is waiting for you there. Boss, I want to go too. Gavinrad raised his hand. Boss, you can't bring me along for the mission to Nozdormu. I've been holding it in for so many years. After all, the battlefield is the romance of the brave. Do you think you'll allow me to? Looking at Gavinrad's appearance, which had turned into a middle-aged man with a little baldness, Duque was filled with emotions. At this point in history, the 5 silver sages would have completely withered away. Turallion had disappeared in the explosion in the Outland. Uther had died under Arthas' sword, Gavin Rad had died in battle in Andoril, and Sidan Dathrahan's soul had been devoured by the Dreadlord. Now, other than Uther, the other 4 men were still active. Go. Thank you for staying with me all these years. When you can't fight anymore, come back to my fief and retire. Duque gave Gavin Rad a big hug. On the other side, Krasis had opened a portal and rushed over. He walked around Alexstrasza in human form. However, the Red Dragon Queen seemed to be in a temper and didn't care about Krasis's flattery. Instead, she walked over and said to Duque, "Yo Duque, I've helped you so much. You let me spend so many boring years in the void, and you even asked me to help you take care of your woman. How are you going to thank me?" She had a cold and elegant face, a high chin, hands on her slender waist, and a perfect split of her legs. She had the demeanor of a high-end, elegant and classy queen. A man, a big tofu, should be like a little brother, able to stretch and shrink as he pleased. Duque gave in and lowered his head. He bumped into a basin that Vanessa had passed to him, and lifted the semicircular silver lid. When Duze confidently revealed the treasure inside, what appeared in front of the Red Dragon Queen was a large plate of knockoff Peking duck that exuded a soft holy light. The oily roast duck was roasted to a perfect reddish-brown color. Coupled with the holy light, its appearance alone was enough to make one drool. Even the Windrunner sisters and Jaina, who were a few meters away, could not help but stretch their necks, let alone Alexstrasza, who looked cold on the outside but was actually a glutton. Gulp. There was an obvious swallowing movement in the throat of the proud queen. She snorted and turned her head away, her nose almost reaching the sky. Do you think that I, who has seen everything in the world, will be bought by mere mortals? Duque cursed in his heart. Damn it, it's as if dragons don't sleep and don't get sleepy. I've been in the void for 10 years. If I'm not eating, I'm sleeping. The number of times I've actually fought can be counted on one hand. Of course, the Red Dragon Queen is used to ward off evil spirits. I'll just treat it as feeding a glutton. Oh no, to put it more elegantly, I'm spending my time to buy peace. Of course, on the surface, Duque still gave face to this glutton queen. Duque bowed elegantly. No. This is just a small token of my gratitude to your majesty. This is just the appetizer. Tonight's banquet will definitely satisfy you. Appetizer? The queen's sharp nose twitched secretly as if she was trying to inhale every fragrant molecule in the air. Finally, she revealed a satisfied smile. That's more like it. She held up 5 fingers. I want 5 meals cooked by you. She wanted to say every week, but felt that would be too easy on Duque. In the end, she hurriedly added, every day. Duque looked troubled. But I have to go to Nozdormu for a mission the day after tomorrow. It's business. Krasis hurriedly whispered into the queen's ear in Draconic. Alexstrasza's face fell. Then, let's have a feast tonight. I'm telling you, I won't allow you to skimp on the food, and it can't be food that has been eaten in Karazhan. Of course. Duque sighed in his heart. He had passed the test. In Karazhan, with her help, there was a lot of food. Because they didn't raise chickens or ducks, it was all plants. After eating for so many years, Duque was almost sick of it. The Red Dragon Queen was the same. If not, she wouldn't have fallen in love with roast duck. While Duque was distracted, Duque was shocked to find that the queen was already wiping her mouth with a napkin. Wait, where's the roast duck? What's with those steaming duck bones on the plate? What's with that huge red shadow that looked like a dragon's head? Duque was speechless. Krasis's face was full of awkwardness. Alexstrasza glared at Duque. Why are you looking at me? Have you never seen a lady eat? No. I've never seen a lady like you. Let me tell you, I've already spat out the bones. The humanoid Red Dragon Queen waved her small claws. My liver hurts a little. So there's a version that doesn't spit out bones? At the side, Duque's lovers covered their mouths, looking like they wanted to laugh but didn't dare to. The banquet was held in Duque's fief in the Elven Forest, in the Windy Lake Villa. There were more people at the banquet tonight. In order to welcome the return of the Red Dragon Queen, Theon, and the other Alliance heroes, William, Kalia, Kudrin, and Jurban still chose to use the teleportation portal to welcome the return of the Alliance heroes. It could be said that apart from Anduin and Abindus, who were in charge of the front lines, almost everyone who could come was here. After all, this was both a welcome banquet and a celebration for the victory at Mount Hyjal. As the host and one of the hostesses, Marchioness Elysia personally welcomed these distinguished guests at the door. To Azeroth. To the Alliance's victory, cheers. Even though he had retired from the position of the Alliance's commander, Duque's position as the core had not wavered at all. Hence, he was the one who gave the toast. Cheers. Strong arms were raised high in the air. Everyone present was either a hero who persisted in the front lines, or a king who spared no effort in supporting the fight against the evil king. At this moment, everyone's heart was burning with passion. The Burning Legion's boss, Sargeras, had been sent into the bottomless abyss. One of the two commanders of the Burning Legion, Archimond, had died at Mount Hyjal. Although the undead army was still entrenched in the Tirisful forest, the enemy's boss had died. Would the final victory be far away? Cheers. Chapter 987. Cheers. With a few pieces of roasted meat in her mouth that she had just bitten off a steak, Alexstrasza also shouted. The group of big shots wasn't drinking traditional wine now. As a transmigrator, it would be unfair to the audience if he did not bring harm to the world. After the end of the second battle of the Dark Portal, Duque started to work on some technology that was not really technology. For example, brewing technology. Relying on the system's memory comparison and the support of a group of wine fanatics, he managed to produce beer and white wine that tasted 8 or 9 out of 10 before he transmigrated. Now they were drinking the iced beer invented by Duque. It tasted so good. Even Queen Kalia, who did not like to drink, secretly took a few sips. William's thin beard was covered in the white foam of the beer, and he looked a little funny. Brother Duque, when are you coming back to lead us to attack Tirisful? Duque smiled. If I don't stabilize my body, I won't be able to command on the front lines. But you can't rush it. There are still more than 100,000 Alliance troops in Kalimdor to clear out the demons. You should at least wait for Mograine and Turayan to return, right? King Nosdormu is too much. Brother, you're in such a hurry to carry out some mysterious mission when your body isn't stable, William muttered. Kudrin nudged Varian in the side with a kind gesture. Who knew, Nosdormu, you bastard? Pay for my feast. As Nosdormu's elder sister, Alexstrasza immediately scolded. She obviously drank a little too much. Even though Duque had repeatedly reminded them not to mix white wine and beer, there would always be dragons courting death. However, this caused the dragon race to scold each other, which was a good thing. Of course, while everyone was celebrating, they were also discussing how to flatten Lordaeron City. In everyone's eyes, Arthas, who had been chopped in half, was already a dish on the plate. However, Duque said that everyone could only be cautiously optimistic. As a living person, Duque could not wait to be burned to ashes by the Forsaken. Unfortunately, in the original history, the next step would be the Lich King Nazul rebelling and leaving the Burning Legion. In this life, Duque did not dare to guarantee that Nazul would jump out. Moreover, with Nazul's rebellion, there would no longer be a scene of the Dark Ranger Sylvanas angering Arthas and becoming the Forgotten Queen. Duque had no idea how the situation would develop. It was a good thing that the Calamity Army and the Burning Legion were fighting each other, but if they were still in the same boat, they could only fight to the end. Duque did not respect the original work at all. He did not mind promoting further peace between the Alliance and the Horde. He even thought of enticing the Horde to send troops to attack Lordaeron directly. Unknowingly, it was already late at night and the banquet ended. Duque could hold his liquor very well. He didn't even need Vanessa's help. However, when he returned to the bedroom, Duque realized that none of the lights were on. Suddenly, an elegant sound of a harp rang out, like the tinkling of a clear spring in the depths of the mountains. It had a familiar and graceful gentleness, and Duque's heart was on fire. Aurelia, my dear. Just then, the second beautiful sound of a harp rang out, and the song suddenly changed from a solo to a more cheerful ensemble. Windsor? Just as Duke was thinking about what kind of surprise they would give him, the third harp sound rang out. The craftsmanship seemed to be slightly rougher than the first two harps, but after the first few notes, it displayed a wonderful sound of a harp craftsman's level. This is. Just as Duque's face was filled with surprise, an even bigger surprise was yet to come. In the darkness, a row of keys appeared in midair. It was not accurate to say that they were keys. They were clearly rectangular pieces of ice. An extremely light ice percussion hammer hit the keys, that had a semicircular cross-section, and suddenly there was a clear and melodious sound like chimes. The next moment, when the small hammer needed the previous note again, another piece of ice keys formed under the hammer. The light and clear sound of the harp mixed with the crisp sound of the percussion, forming a wonderful mini-symphony that gave people an inexplicable sense of joy. Suddenly, 12 beams of light surrounded Duque at the same time, neatly arranged according to the position of a clock. What came into view were 5 extremely charming and beautiful women. The one in the middle was naturally Aurelia. She gently stroked the harp with one hand as she leaned on the chaise longue. The rose-red chair complemented her slender and beautiful figure, but it did not diminish her voluptuous figure. She was only wearing a light veil, but her face was full of dignity, causing Duque to gulp nonstop. On the left, Windsor leaned lightly on the windowsill, her posture graceful and relaxed. Under the moonlight, her thick and fluffy silver hair formed a beautiful combination with her smooth and soft jade-like body. Facing Duque, she responded with a gentle gaze. Just the endless love in her eyes was enough to melt Duque's body and mind. On the upper right, Servana's 2 long legs hung down from the beam of the roof, swaying lightly, as if he was stirring up circles of water in a peaceful stream. The beautiful curves of her long legs served as a contrast to the great elasticity of her muscles. The wind around her gently made the green leaves flutter up and down around her, forming a sharp contrast with the resplendent crown on her head. A little further to the left was a noble woman who also had a golden crown on her head. Her eyes were as gentle as water, and her intelligent pupils shone with a light that no one could completely understand. As she played, her golden waterfall-like long hair spread out on her long and beautiful swan-like neck, as well as her perky magic peaks. Even though almost all of her attention was on Duque's face, she still did not stop her delicate fingers. Her nimble performance added the nobility and elegance of an old royal family to her beauty. Unknowingly, Alicia had slowly walked behind Duque, her tender fingers caressing Duque's shoulder. Like the most gentle little wife, she helped Duque take off the gorgeous clothes that were only prepared for outsiders. Looking at each and every one of his beautiful female confidants, Duke suddenly thought maliciously, "Is this the legendary dog abuse festival?" Having any one of them was enough to cause any man in Azeroth to go crazy with jealousy, let alone 5 of them together? It was clearly late at night, but Duque's gaze seemed to have traveled through time and space, seeing the blue and calm ocean in summer, the warm and smooth beach sand, and the happy world filled with the laughter of the birds. Duque opened his arms proudly. "Which one is it tonight?" "Which one?" Aurelia had a smile on her lips. "Didn't I say it before? I want you to treat each of your sisters equally. I don't mind you bringing me new sisters, but you must first settle all of them. Isn't that right?" Duque's expression suddenly changed. He finally knew what this was. Sisters of one heart, grinding an iron rod into a needle. Chapter 988. Such a beautiful scene. If it were any of the players who had fought alongside him in the game, they would definitely be envious and jealous of Duke to death. In the original history, Wuxia, who was bound by fate, wandered around Scholomance with an elegant and pitiful appearance. She led the Silver Coalition to fight against the Scourge, formed the Kirin Tor Expeditionary Force, and finally pulled the Dalajan to the Alliance's side. Aurelia, one of the 5 heroes of the Dark Portal, who went missing during the expedition to the Outland, was honored as one of the 5 heroes of the Dark Portal, and had a statue erected in the King's Valley in Stormwind City. Not only was she the heroine of the Alliance, but she was also the leader of the series of fierce battles against the Scourge and Mount Hydrel, but she was also the object of countless men's lust. She once resolutely fought against the Scourge, died in battle, and was resurrected as a banshee, became the Forgotten Queen, and finally fought her way to the throne of the Great Tribe. Among the 5 beauties, Getting one was enough for Duque to brag to his friends for the rest of his life. In the end, Duque took all of them. The satisfaction that filled every corner of his soul was something that nothing he did before he transmigrated could compare to. Now, these 5 women actually said that they would work together to deal with him. As the living proof of my outstanding achievements, you actually dare to challenge my position as the head of the family? You are really seeking death. Nothing to say. Draw your sword. Come on. Fight to your heart's content. The moment Duque's godly sword appeared, one sword culled 19 continents. Are you guys scared or not? At this moment, no matter if it was the female ranger hero who had once fought her way through the mountains of corpses and seas of blood, or the noble queen who was as noble as if sitting on the clouds, every delicate and beautiful face revealed a trembling expression. They unconsciously remembered the tragic scene of being beaten by Duque's godly sword, and the humiliation of kneeling and begging for mercy in front of the powerful godly sword. Looking at the aggressive Duque, Aurelia lightly pursed her lips and immediately shouted, "Sisters, what are you afraid of? He is only one person." That's right. There was only one Duque. But Aurelia, aren't you expressing your guilty conscience by saying this? Don't you know that whenever a guy says something like that in a movie, he's always the first to be killed? The Storm Duke du Moke, will kill you 1,000 times. In a group fight, there was no other way. First, take care of the leader. The sword chi was like a rainbow, and the spear was like a fierce dragon. Before Aurelia could finish her sentence, she was already knocked down by Duque. The attacks that were as dense as raindrops easily rendered the dignified and elegant big sister speechless. She could only endure the storm bitterly, struggling at death's door. At this time, Duque's ferocity finally aroused the common hatred of the women, and Duque soon fell into a state of siege. Don't worry, watch as I raise my sword and fight in all directions at night. Who was she? Gradually, it was no longer important who the enemy was. What was important was that he knew that she was the enemy. You're here to help? Kill. Accidentally caught? Kill. Join forces to attack those who offend my authority. Kill. Anyway, Duque's godly sword never killed nameless people. Since you've encountered my godly sword, surrender and beg for mercy is your only way out. Duque suddenly thanked himself for switching to a priest. What's so good about a priest? A priest has a lot more spiritual attribute points than a mage. What is spiritual? Spiritual is the recovery of magic power. With magic power, there is combat power. I, Duke, am invincible. Wuxia and Jaina begged for mercy after they were defeated, but he did not let them go. The two hugged each other, tears still on their faces. Aurelia was defeated on the chaise longue. Windsor was killed, on the windowsill. Cervantes could not escape from the god of war, Duque's pursuit even if he fled to the roof. This battle was simply earth-shattering. Before the sky brightened, Duque dashed out valiantly in a long robe. Duque snapped his fingers. Let me sleep for a few hours. Then, please give me 12 fried eggs and 24 high-level mana potions. Pretentiousness is always with me. Duque's arrogance was so great that it almost scared the two maids to death. After sending the two maids away, Duque fell to the ground with a thud. His last words before he died were, "My harem is not complete yet, I still need to work hard." The next evening, Duque asked Solarian to open a teleportation portal and bring him to the Dalajan ruins to meet Lothar. Duque, you want us to reduce the intensity of our attacks? So that the Calamity Army and the Burning Legion will fight each other and cause internal strife? Anduin, the ultimate goal of eliminating these evils has never changed. But don't you think it's better for us to fight a strong and unified enemy? Two evil enemies that have been weakened by each other? Anyway, the main forces of Turalian and Mograine have not withdrawn from Kalimdor. We can't organize a general attack at all. It's better to just slow down. Anduin stroked his chin, which had a lot of white beard. Duque, your idea is indeed good. But are you sure that Lich King Nazul will rebel? I can't be sure, but anyone who was forcibly killed, stripped of their body, left with only their soul, and finally sealed in a small ice skull would feel unhappy, right? From the very beginning, Nazul never really wanted to be loyal to Kil'jaeden. Well, you're right. What do you think the probability of Nazul rebelling is? 70%. Duke had wanted to confidently say 100%. But history had changed beyond recognition, and he dared not guarantee it. However, it wasn't Servanas who was now serving Arthas, but the more ambitious, arrogant, and restless former Sun King Anastrian. Duque felt that it was hilarious. After hearing the 70% probability, Anduin shivered. Although Duque had retired from the front line because of the curse, no one felt that there was anything wrong with Duque. On the contrary, Duque's suggestion was so incisive that Anduin could not find a reason to refute it. All right, I agree. Yes, how long will you be going this time? I don't know when Nosdorm will send me back after the mission is completed. But for insurance, I will arrange everything. Finally, nurture William. I think he's the most suitable helmsman of the next generation. Let him gain experience, and let him be the permanent leader of the Alliance in a few years. After hearing Duque's words, Anduin suddenly felt a sense of respect. If not for the fact that they had known each other for many years and knew Duque's temperament, anyone would think that Duque was going to be the second Thoradin the Great after flirting with so many queens and controlling so many kingdoms. Only Anduin, who had gone through all the hardships together, stood his ground against the opinions of the people in the kingdom, and had always been firmly supporting Duke in the Stormwind Kingdom. Chapter 989. Now Anduin felt that his long-term trust had finally been repaid. Anduin stood up and walked to the balcony of the living room. He faced the sky in the south, where his childhood friend had died. It was also where the city of Stormwind was located. In his heart, Anduin shouted, "Lang! Lang, did you see that? We did not trust the wrong person. Although Duque is not a saint, he is definitely the biggest contributor to the rise of Stormwind." When Anduin turned around again, Duque saw the passion and endless gratitude in Anduin's eyes. "Thank you, Duque." Duque smiled and waved his hand. He walked to the balcony and stood next to Anduin. "You're welcome. I also promised Lang that I would work for Stormwind and Azeroth. This was also my promise, but I chose to keep it. It is rare to find someone who can remain sober and calm in the face of power." Anduin's aged face was filled with ecstasy. "Is that so?" Duque was unmoved. He stood with his hands behind his back and looked to the south. "At least, there are two of them here, right?" Without another word, two fists, one big and one small, bumped into each other in the air. One old and one young, they looked at each other and smiled. After the undead calamity, the remnants of the old alliance had been swallowed up. Without the two stubborn old men, Tyrrhenas and Antonidas, and without Xeon who had yet to awaken and might become the old wolf king in the future, and without Anastrian's hindrance, the entire alliance not only had more countries than in history, but also in terms of strength and unity. But with so many countries, the leader of the alliance had to be a human. The human population was large, and there were also many countries. The overall strength of the race was stronger, which meant that the alliance could only have humans as its core. Unfortunately, the leaders of the human countries had all sorts of problems. Kalia was just a mascot that Duque had made. Ronan, who was about to take over the Dalajan, was too soft-hearted. Jaina tended to overthink things. As the saying went, even a wise man would make a mistake. Putting aside Gilnis, who had yet to return to the alliance, and Stromgard and Alterac, if Duque didn't seize power, the only one who could be the leader of the alliance was William. It just so happened that Duque himself had been affected by Archimonde's parting gift and turned completely dark, so Duque took advantage of the situation and stepped down. Duque had asked himself more than once, if not for the threat of the Burning Legion, would he want to become the Emperor and become the second Thoradin the Great? The answer was yes. Who wouldn't want to be the Emperor? If you can manage others, why should you be managed by others? Unfortunately, he couldn't be the Emperor. This was not as simple as a hot potato. If the human countries formed an empire, then the alliance would no longer be an alliance. It would become an empire and its allies. Would the other races be willing to become the underlings of the human empire? Duque calculated countless times, but the answer was always negative. Joining an alliance where all the countries and races were equal was not the same thing as subserviently joining a huge empire to become its wings. Even if he controlled the queen, it didn't mean that he had complete control over the country. If the people were dissatisfied, there would be an uprising. When that time came, he could just cry. Moreover, the other races would have deeper doubts. Even if they were forced to join, there would be all sorts of conflicts, let alone sincere cooperation. To have internal strife in front of the Burning Legion was simply courting death. Think about it, if the alliance didn't have the Night Elves, Draenei, Pandaren, and Werewolves, it would be the end of the Burning Legion when they came to Azeroth. Rather than establishing an empty shell of an empire that would be destroyed in 8 to 10 years, why not pretend to be a saint, gain a good reputation, and be the uncrowned king behind the scenes? Anduin would never know that Duque was so far-sighted, so he only saw Duque as a true knight with pure and great sentiments like himself. After bidding farewell to Anduin and visiting Magni and Jurbin, Duque returned to the Windlake Villa after leaving more research and development manuals on black technology. After tonight's banquet, tomorrow would be the third day. In the morning, it was the appointed time to work for Nozdormu. After returning to the villa, Duque felt that the gazes around him were weird. The gazes of his knights were always filled with loyalty, admiration, and envy. You know that kind of gaze. Every mate's face was red. They were obviously shy, but they all puffed out their chests and sucked in their bellies. Duque held his forehead, feeling a little annoyed. Just as he entered his study, a voice sounded. To Dear Beast Duke Marcus, Her Majesty Kalia Menethil fervently hopes to attend your banquet tonight. If your excellency wants to unleash his bestial nature, please seize the opportunity tonight. Looking at Vanessa, who stood by the door expressionlessly and with a standard demeanor, like the most loyal maid, who was spitting venomous words at him, Duque felt that his balls were hurting even more. You're dirty. Vanessa. Oh, are you going to toy with Princess Kalia's pure maiden heart before completely trampling and abandoning it? Alright, I understand. I'll reject Her Majesty Kalia now. Solarian, who was behind him, finally could not help but burst out laughing, while the person involved, Duque, spat out a mouthful of blood. What the hell? Vanessa had really thrown caution to the wind. I really shouldn't have put them together back then. They've already formed a clique. Duque's heart almost softened. However, after the bitter battle last night, Duque knew that he couldn't take it anymore. Duque took a deep breath, took out 2 balls of light, and said solemnly, These are to Her Majesty Alexstrasza's blessing of life. For a woman, it's equivalent to 15 years of youth. I'm going to the River of Time to carry out a mission. If I don't come back, you can use it. Duque had lied. What he had given was obviously Nozdormu's blessing of eternal life, but Vanessa didn't know. Vanessa's expression changed drastically in an instant. She completely lost her venomous tongue, as well as her pride that relied on intimacy to gain favor. Tears streamed down her face. Without even half a second's consideration, she sent back a ball of light. Master, since the Van Cleef family was sheltered by Master when they were young, and escaped the fate of a violent death, then the Van Cleef family will definitely serve Master for generations to come. It doesn't feel bad to slowly grow old in the Marcus family. As for Her Majesty Kalia's choice, that's Her Majesty Kalia's business. Duque sighed, turned around, and went to the dining hall with a slightly heavy heart. When the dining hall's door opened, Duque was surprised to see 3 queens, a marquis, and 2 ranger generals sitting neatly in front of the dining table. Duque suddenly turned around, casting a murderous look. Who knew that this bastard maid would actually have the nerve to forcibly turn invisible, and then use swift run to run away? Vanessa. Chapter 990. There's no second time in life. Besides, I'm quite satisfied with my current life. As long as I can let my people, the people I love, and the people who love me live a good life, I'll be satisfied. Giving up my past for the sake of my youth was never an option from the start. Kalia didn't even refuse after feeling touched. As expected, she decisively rejected Duque's gift. That's right. If there's a man I love deeply who chooses to repay my youth in such a way to reject my love, I won't do it either. This is the last restraint of a lady. Of course, if we can be together in the end, and the person I love is willing to give me his youth, then it'll be a different story. The despicable Jaina even added insult to injury. Duque glared at Jaina fiercely. Damn you, I'll definitely spank your butt later. Jaina secretly stuck out her tongue, then turned her head away, ignoring Duque. Throughout the banquet, Duque felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. Although Kalia and the others were reminiscing about the past as if they were talking about family matters, Duque really couldn't lose his temper. Fortunately, the banquet didn't last too long. Kalia threw him a slightly aggrieved look, then very politely left. The rest were all his women. Aurelia very elegantly used a napkin to wipe the non-existent sauce from the corner of her mouth, then sighed. Duque, we're not forbidding you from adding more sisters to us. We just hope that you can restrain yourself. Then, if this is fate's arrangement, then we have no objections. Sylvanas continued. You'll be going on a mission next year. Are you confident? 80%, Sasha said. If you want any of us to accompany you tonight, that's no problem, but please ensure that you have enough stamina for tomorrow. Jaina and Elugia didn't speak, quietly gazing at Duque with eyes full of love. In the end, Duque chose to hug Aurelia to sleep. There was no passion, only the peace of a family. As he softly recounted the bits and pieces of the past, Duque peacefully fell asleep. In the morning, the time to return to the past finally came. Through the portal, the 6 people who were going back this time gathered on a piece of barren land at the junction of the Elven Forest and the Red Ridge Mountain. Duque looked at Grom and Brock, then at Ronan and Vanessa, and finally nodded at Krasis. Let's begin. Nozdorma's loud voice came from the void. More information began to flood into the minds of the transmigrators from the void. Other than Duque, the other 5 finally understood the meaning of returning to the past. The ancient war. That was the limit of Nozdorma's power. It was the foundation of the world of Azeroth, and even the foundation of the entire world. If the Burning Legion had won the ancient war 10,000 years ago, then the entire timeline would have been completely overturned. That would have been the greatest violation and blasphemy to the efforts of a transmigrator like Duque. The 6 of them felt their surroundings blur, and a terrifying feeling enveloped their bodies. It was as if they were covered by an invisible glass cover, and a large amount of air was instantly pumped into them. The surging waves of air that could not be captured by sight pressed down on everyone's bodies. It was a terrifying feeling that made it hard for them to breathe. The world around them kept changing, and the trees in the Elven Forest that were already showing signs of winter suddenly grew larger. Master! Vanessa cried out in shock, but Duque could not respond at all. Even if he tried to force a smile on his face, it would probably be distorted if Vanessa saw it. In the next moment, they realized that the members of the mission seemed to have become long and narrow noodle people. Before they could even cry out in shock, this strange and distorted illusion of time began to devour everyone. Everyone was like a small boat trapped in a whirlpool in the ocean, spinning clockwise at high speed. The faster they went, the more dizzy they became. Countless strange and blurred sounds and images assaulted their senses. This amount of information was so terrifying. It was no wonder that Nozdormu had to do a will test in advance. It felt like the trees hundreds of meters away were being sucked in by the whirlpool, passing by Duque and entering the whirlpool of time. Soon it was not just ordinary things. Things of all sizes began to fly over, and even the meteors in the sky and the Crimson Mountains broke apart, whistling past, and disappeared in the whirlpool. This mental attack was so violent that the few teammates around Duque quickly lost consciousness. Only Duque remained conscious with the System Elf's high-speed information classification and the protection of the spiritual sea. Duque instantly traveled through space and time and saw a huge Milky Way circling in the void. It was a long river of history formed by countless historical fragments. The System Elf greedily absorbed all the information that could be collected at 80% capacity, until Duque was sent to the distant end of the Milky Way by a huge force in Azeroth. The earth was covered in frost, and the bitter cold winter had arrived. Unknowingly, he had entered the dark portal for 16 years. Walking in the ruins of Lordaeron, the former Sun King Anastrian looked gloomy. Of course, any lich would look extremely cold and evil to a bystander. regardless of whether they preserved their appearance when they were alive, or if they directly cut off their heads and left only a skull. As the highest-ranking defector who volunteered to join the Calamity Army, the Sun King had always been allowed to retain his will and all his subordinates. Even the corpses of the High Elves that the Calamity Army slaughtered would be assigned to him after they became immortals. Anastrian had obtained the immortality that he wanted more, but he always felt that he had lost more. Yes, it was status. In the past he was a king that no one could command and order. A high and mighty king. After surrendering to the Calamity Army, even if he could retain a large number of subordinates, he still felt that he was a damned slave. Arthas could order him, the Lich King could order him, and even those damned dreadlords could order him around like a dog. In his cold eyes that were burning with blue flames, there was only unwillingness and anger. However, the turning point was coming. Archimonde, a demon commander so powerful that he could destroy the great magic city of Dalagen with just a spell. In the end, he died in the world that he came to destroy, and was buried in the hands of those ants that he looked down on. And his death became the catalyst for ambition. What was more interesting was that Anastrian noticed that no one actually informed the Dreadlords of the news of Archimonde's death. Chapter 991. The Alliance had stopped their attacks. Most kingdoms of the living did not like to wage war during winter. If the scourge of Lordaeron belonged to Anastrian, then he would definitely take the opportunity to launch a large-scale invasion during winter, striving to destroy all the living. That way, he would be able to occupy the entire eastern and western Plaguelands and cut off the connection between the Alliance and the continent. When Kuel Salus was alone, it would be the time for him to punish the despicable traitor Sylvanas Windrunner who had stolen his kingdom and territory. Unfortunately, it was not time yet. He could only mobilize a pitiful number of undead elves, which numbered less than 100,000. Even though these undead were of high quality, with more than a fifth of them being liches of various ranks, the number of undead elves was still too little. Compared to the scourge of Tirisfal that numbered nearly 10 million, it was not even worth mentioning. So he waited, like a spider that had weaved a spider's web and hid in a dark corner, waiting for its prey to come to it. Quiet and full of patience. How many months has it been since we last heard from Lord Archimonde? Why is there still no news? Desrock, the leader of the Dreadlords in Lordaeron, stomped his hooves impatiently. I'm sick of these rotten zombies. If this goes on, we'll all rot into zombies. The Dreadlords stood in what used to be the royal garden of Lordaeron. It was in this palace that Arthas had murdered his own father and brought the apocalypse to his people. That had only happened a few months ago, but it felt like a century had passed. Now, the garden that had once been green even in winter was rapidly decaying, just like the zombies and skeletons that were roaming around. Our duty is to manage this place, Desrock. Another Dreadlord reminded the leader. Another Dreadlord reminded the leader. Then we have to stay here and ensure that the scourge can attack at any time. Of course I know that, Verimithus. Desrock roared. But no matter how many problems there are, we should have received some orders long ago. The discussion of the Dreadlords was interrupted by a violent sound. It was the sound of a door suddenly falling. The two demon kings turned towards the source of the sound at the same time, and opened their bat wings vigilantly, letting out low growls out of habit. Unexpectedly, the one who appeared in front of them was Arthas, a death knight who had disappeared for many months, and was no longer valued by the demon kings. The humans on the eastern side of the undead barrier claimed that they had sliced Arthas in half at the waist, and it did seem to be the case. After all, the lower half of Arthas' body clearly didn't belong to him in the first place. However, that lower body had already fused perfectly with him. Squeezing the horse's abdomen, Invincible stood up and raised its front hooves. Seeing this, every Dreadlord widened their eyes and stared at Arthas as if they were facing their greatest enemy. The self-proclaimed king of Lordaeron was not wearing a helmet. His white hair fell beside his pale face, and he had a smug smile on his face that the Dreadlord hated the most. This was because a person with this kind of smile usually meant that he was untamed and rebellious. This was not an expression that a servant of a servant should have. Arthas' voice was loud and excited. Hello everyone. Dreadlords. Faced with such a disrespectful greeting, these greater demons glared at him fiercely. They were obviously suppressing their anger and not letting it explode. Perhaps I should thank you for taking care of my kingdom while I was away. However, you are no longer of any value to me. The Dreadlord stared at him for a while, dumbfounded. Varimitha was the first to react. He waved his claws and roared. This is our territory. It's the Burning Legion's Lordaeron. The Calamity Legion belongs to the Burning Legion. Arthis laughed maniacally. Her voice was filled with delight and disdain. Not anymore, idiotic demons. Archimonde died in battle under the World Tree on Mount Hyjal 4 months ago. The Burning Legion is finished. It'll be perfect once I kill you all. He grinned and raised Frostmourne high. The runes on the blade shone and danced. He did not even need to tighten the reins. With Invincible, he charged straight at the 3 Dreadlords. However, Arthis had underestimated the Dreadlord's cunning and ability to escape. Unless it was a place of death like Mount Hyjal that had an evil banishing magic circle set up in advance, the Dreadlords could really run away. This is not over, you despicable bone scum knight. After letting out a cry of despair, the Dreadlords had no intention of fighting Arthis at all. They immediately teleported away. Their speed was obviously faster than Invincible's movement. Frostmourne only pierced the air and let out a disappointed wail. Arthis was furious, but he quickly regained his cheerful mood. Planet Azeroth's protective circle had been repaired. The demons could not leave, and no reinforcements could come in. The Dreadlords were like rootless duckweeds. They would fall sooner or later. The difference was whether they would die by his hand or the alliance that he hated. We knew you would come back, Prince Arthis. Kel'Thuzad was very excited. Arthis did not even bother to look at his loyal servant. Instead, he stared at Anastrian. I'm glad to see that your body is still strong, Sun King Anastrian, Arthis said sarcastically. You also knew that I would come back. So, are you ready to lower your humble head? Anastrian's anger was erupting from the depths of his soul. It swayed wildly, but the soul fire burning in his eye sockets was still calm. Lowering your head to the strong is the greatest principle in the world. After saying that, he lowered his head. But in his heart, he swore that this would be the last time. No one knew that without a strong enough external influence, the wheel of fate would continue to follow its fixed path and continue to roll forward, crushing all the weak existences. However, when a bearing or part of the wheel disappeared, fate would naturally find a replacement. On this day, Anastrian found the bitter Dreadlord. He subdued the Dreadlord Varimitha and defeated Desrock. Then, he launched a counterattack against Arthis, whose strength was greatly reduced due to the Lich King's weakening. He almost caused the next Lich King to fall. In the end, the Sun King still failed. Out of the desire to be independent and the insecurity of the powerful alliance, Anastrian united the undead with strong self-consciousness as the Forgotten Ones. At the same time, he began to rebuild the underground area of Lordaeron. He wanted to rebuild this place into an underground fortress that any army could conquer. The Undercity. Chapter 992. Who am I? Where am I? Where am I going? The groggy Duque naturally asked the legendary 3 philosophical questions in his mind. He forced his heavy eyelids open, and what he saw was not the green trees and mountains that he had imagined, but a high-tech object that did not match the surroundings at all. Through the huge porthole, he could see the universe clearly. It was extremely dark in the distance, and there were no stars, but there was a distorted void that glowed with green light from time to time. Up close, he could clearly see the streamlined hull of the spaceship, and the body of the spaceship had the iconic pale yellow-green light. There were black decorations with green edges everywhere in the cabin, and they were filled with dark energy. Duque's first reaction was, Holy sh*T. His second reaction was, Holy sh*T. His third reaction was, I bought a big watch last year. Am I going to be struck by lightning for being too pretentious before I transmigrated? What happened to going to the forest? Throwing me into the Burning Legion's battleship. Nozdormu. Believe it or not, when I go back, I'll throw this battleship over there one day to cover your ass. That's right. The pale Duque was horrified to find that he had been thrown into one of the Burning Legion's battleships from 10,000 years ago by that bastard Nozdormu. At that moment, a lot of terrible thoughts flashed through Duque's mind. He really didn't know if his resurrection and life-saving technique could still be used here. Looking around, Duque finally felt a little relieved. The surroundings were huge, and he could not see anything. The system genie did not scan any confinement facilities. However, there was a bunch of unconscious, weird-looking guys lying on the ground. What the hell was that? Could it be that even aliens accidentally clicked, "Do you want to know the meaning of life?" when surfing the internet? Then the computer was immediately downloaded with a bunch of rubbish web-based games and rogue software. Oh no! Was it immediately teleported here to play unlimited games? Huh. I didn't expect a candidate to have super strong mental power? Interesting. That's right, sister. What a surprise. Looks like I've picked out a good seedling. However, he's overflowing with a faint holy light. It seems like he's not someone summoned by Master. Should I get rid of it? The voices came from above, but why did Duque feel that the two voices speaking in the Eridar demon language sounded so familiar? Raising his head, Duque's face darkened. Because in this huge and spacious cabin, 30 meters above his head, two figures, one purple and one yellow, that he was very familiar with, were staring at him with eyes full of venom and malice. The Eridar twins, high-rank warlocks Auras and Queen Sololas. Duque had no doubt that the two adjutants of Kill Jaden in the Twisted Nether with their full strength could easily kill him. Fortunately, Duque was 100% sure that Gemini wouldn't do anything to him. Why? Because just now Duque's face had turned black, and it was literally black. The moment he raised his head, Duque entered shadow form. This was especially so for Queen Sololas, who specialized in shadow magic. We're on the same side, don't shoot. As expected, the Eridar twins' clear and melodious giggles could be heard. Interesting. Really interesting. Using light to cover up darkness? What a magical creature. Looks like we don't have to wait and choose anymore. It's him then. We can get rid of the rest. Yes. The Burning Legion's way of dealing with things was always so simple and violent. Why was the Burning Legion called this? Wasn't it just burning down millions of stars, turning every conquered planet into scorched earth, and annihilating all life? Originally, Duque wouldn't feel the slightest bit of pain even if all the monsters and Godzilla and xenomorphs lying on the ground died. But not this time. Duque bowed deeply. What came out of his mouth was the translated Eridar demon language. Respected Lady Auras and Queen Sololas, please wait a moment. I have a servant there. I believe that with him, I can better serve the Burning Legion. Duke was pointing at Grom Hellscream, who was still unconscious. Although Duque didn't know why Lord Hell was thrown here with him, it wouldn't be good if the Burning Legion got rid of such a powerful free fighter. The Eridar twins weren't surprised by Duque's request. What surprised them was that the Eridar language wasn't a simple language. It wasn't just because the language was cryptic and had many different pronunciations, making it difficult for normal creatures to learn. More importantly, every word in the Eridar language contained a powerful dark force. This was the Twisted Nether, where the demon's power was strongest. If one wasn't powerful enough, they wouldn't even be able to say a powerful demon's name in the Eridar language. They could only use all sorts of awkward pronouns. Of course, it wasn't a problem to say a name like Archimonde in the human language in Azeroth. After all, it was a transliteration of the name. Now, not only was Duque proficient in the Eridar language, but he could also say the names of the Eridar twins. This meant that Duque's power was at least second to that of a demon lord. Queen Sololas was slightly stunned. Then she fired off a barrage of questions. What creature are you? Name? Occupation? Where did you come from? Why do you know the Eridar language? Duque scanned the area and found that there were at least thousands of different alien creatures in the huge square. They all had a dark aura. After using the system elf to analyze Queen Solola's expression, pupil dilation, heartbeat and other data, the system concluded that there was an 92% chance that the Eridar twins really didn't know who Duque was. Then, Duque could boldly deduce that if Nozdormu's teleportation was correct, Then Kil'jaeden must have been searching for various surrenders and guides in the worlds conquered by the Burning Legion in order to participate in the ancient war in Azeroth. Then the Eredar twins first observed Duke's physique, and saw that Duke could freely switch between light and dark powers before deciding to complete the selection. Duke believed that he had seen through 80% of Kil'jaeden's thoughts. The old man wanted a powerful spy, so he chose a suitable candidate from the planets conquered by the Burning Legion. Duke took a deep breath. I am a human shadow priest. My name is Infernal. I come from the Burning Legion's vast territory in a galaxy called Andromeda, a planet called Mass Effect. As for why I know the Eredar language, of course, it's because I admire the great Sir Kil'jaeden and worked hard to teach myself. Chapter 993. Nozdormu was actually crazy. Even if Duke owed him a favor, he actually sent Duke to the ancient war. Who was Duke? Duke was the man known as the History Disintegrator. Well, the biggest joke in the 16th year of the Dark Portal was born. Nozdormu sent a History Disintegrator to fix the history of 10,000 years ago. At the same time, in the 16th year of the Dark Portal, in the winter, the course of history was more or less the same. In order to punish the Lich King's betrayal, the demon commander Kil'jaeden took Illidan in as a minion and sent him on a mission to destroy the Lich King. Illidan received the help of Vashj Naga, who returned from Azhara and entered the tomb of Sargeras to obtain the artifact Sargeras' Eye, which was used to destroy the Lich King. The Night Elf Warden Maiev Shadowsong lost many of his subordinates in order to hunt down Illidan. Malfurion and Tyrande responded to Maiev's call for help and arrived at the Lordaeron continent. They were unfamiliar with the place and asked for help from the Alliance. The Alliance sent an elite task force led by Kael, that's in Gavin Rad, to hunt down and successfully stop Illidan from destroying the Lich King. However, Maiev used lies to make Malfurion release Illidan again to save Tyrande, who was in danger. Under Kil'jaeden's guidance, Illidan found a small magic portal that Archimonde used in the middle of the Endless Sea and ran to the Outland. Maiev once again entered the portal to the Outland in order to hunt down Illidan. In this life, because the Blood Elves were one of the Alliance's hardcore supporters, only Vashj Naga joined Illidan's army. After a big battle, Illidan still captured Maiev alive. Illidan accepted the help of Akuma the Broken and defeated Magtheridon, who ruled the Outland, to become the new king of the Outland. However, Kil'jaeden still chased him here and forced Illidan to attack the Lich King again. On the other hand, because Nazul betrayed the Burning Legion, Nazul's power was greatly weakened, which caused Arthas's power to weaken as well. Arthas, who had been chased away by Anastrian, met up with the former king of the Spider Kingdom, the Great Beetle Anub'alak, and the Frostbone Dragon Syndagosa in Northrend. They easily killed and revived the ancient blue dragon Saffron, passed through the ancient Azanirab Empire's underground passage, and arrived at the Icecrown Glacier where the Lich King was imprisoned. Arthas led the Scourge army to defeat Illidan's army and liberated the Lich King and the throne. She merged with Nazul's soul and became the new Lich King. She then fell into a deep slumber while Illidan escaped back to the Outland. A huge historical divergence had appeared at this time. The Dark Portal, Year 16, February 15th. The Alliance seemed to be on a stopwatch as they launched the largest invasion in history. Even the ice and snow hadn't completely melted yet, and the sudden multi-pronged attack left Anastrian and his subordinates dumbfounded. On the northern coast of the Tirisful Woodlands, Sylvanas led 30,000 elite Blood Elves, together with the 70,000 Scarlet Cross Legion led by Mograine, who had secretly returned from Kalimdor. A total of 100,000 troops landed. Further west, on the Whispering Coast, Magni Bronzebeard's Dwarven Mechanized Legion and Tyralian's Kalimdor Expeditionary Force arrived together with Jaina's Theramore army under the cover of Kurtira's fleet. In the southwest, Anduin Lothar's Stormwind Elite Army, Marcus's Territory Private Army led by Reginald Windsor, and the 2nd Tank Corps of Iron Furnace Fort, Thundergod's Hammer, led a fleet across Lordemere Lake and landed near the Maldon Orchard in the southwest of the Undercity, which hadn't been built yet. They pressed close to the Undercity, and Anastrian didn't dare to send a large number of reinforcements. In the southeast, the Alterac Alliance, which was made up of exiled soldiers and Alterac people, was led by Old General Haas and the Radiant Moon Mage Alucia Barov. They followed the Alterac mountain range and approached the Undercity. In the east, in the Hearth Valley, the dwarves used the new technology left by Duque, a new black technology product called the Shield Boring Machine. The dwarves didn't have such a beautiful generator, so they used Avatar to turn the shield boring machine. They spent a whole winter to open up 3 huge tunnels that could accommodate 2 carriages side by side. The undead barrier that blocked the western plaguelands and the terraceful woodlands throat from Hearth Valley all the way to Venomous Spider Valley had become a mere decoration. The 1st Tank Legion of Ironforge, which was renamed Lightning, launched the textbook Blitzkrieg that was proposed by Duque 13 years ago. In just 2 days they crossed the Spider Canyon, which was infested with poisonous spiders, and crossed more than 200 kilometers. They surrounded the 500,000 undead army that was guarding the undead barrier. The Empress Dowager Gavinrad and the Scarlet Crusade led by Abendis, as well as the Dwarves' Tank Legion, to block the retreat of more than 1 million undead army. Coordinating with them was the Stratholme army led by Dathrahin in the east, with the Stratholme army as the core. The 200,000 Lordaeron soldiers who weren't elites couldn't attack the fortress, but the undead army that was suppressing the undead barrier wouldn't be a problem. Anastrian had been a king for 3,000 years, but he had never seen such a complicated military attack, advancing from multiple routes and attacking from multiple directions. The news he received in Undercity was often delayed. By the time he received the news and wanted to send reinforcements, the undead army that was originally guarding the area was basically done for. They were either surrounded or devoured by the reinforcements. Originally, the new Forgotten Kingdom wouldn't be so passive if they could destroy or heavily injure the undead army along the way. In fact, the Sun King did the same. He personally tried to get rid of the most crucial 1st Tank Legion of the dwarves, and get rid of Gavinrad and Theon. In his imagination, with his strength as a Breaking Dawn mage, killing a few paladins wouldn't be a problem at all. In the end he ran into Jaina, Solarian, Caponia, Gina Goldsword, and of course his precious son Kael'Vat's who made him mad. Unfilial son. Neil. The Sun King wanted to suppress his son like before. My great father, Anastrian Sunstrider, is dead. As a mage of the Alliance, I have no need to listen to an evil undead like you who shares the same name as my father. After experiencing the Battle of Mount Hyjal, Kael'Vat's, who had cleared his name and become a hero, had a completely different spirit from before. From the day he killed Archimonde, he finally had the backbone of a powerhouse. Chapter 994. His precious son's forceful words and merciless attacks almost turned Anastrian into a retard. In the eyes of the Sun King, there was no point in arguing. If that did not work, he would just kill all these powerhouses in front of him and turn them into forgotten ones. That way, his undead kingdom would naturally be greatly strengthened. The problem was that he could not defeat these Radiant Moon mages. Logically speaking, a Breaking Dawn mage should have no problem crushing a Radiant Moon. The problem was that the equipment of these Radiant Moon mages was blindingly bright. They were all high-grade epic-grade equipment from Mount Hyjal, and their various attribute bonuses were many times higher than Anastrian's. Although he had once been the Sun King, and his equipment was definitely not bad, being the best of this era, his opponents had equipment that was 2 whole generations ahead of him. When the Sun King's magic could not break through the magic shields of any of the Radiant Moon mages, he knew that he could not win this battle. Once they fell into a tug of war, the natural weakness of fire mages was exposed. Fire mages had the worst stamina out of all mages. He had no choice but to retreat. But when he brought the Silvermoon counselors with him in the next battle, they would face a large group of mages who had joined the Alliance's court mages. It was another pointless battle of magic. Neither side killed the other, and even the Sun King's magic circuits were overloaded. What made the Sun King even more furious was that the other side's equipment was too good, and their mana recovery speed was actually above the undead. If he had enough time to set up a trap and successfully ambush a well-equipped Radiant Moon mage, he might have been able to turn the tables. Who knew that the Alliance would follow the strategy that Duque had left behind from the start? They only wanted to not lose in a battle of magic. Thus, the entire team of mages stayed together, and the Sun King could not find a chance to attack. As a result, the magic domain could not suppress the undead, and the battlefield below became the Alliance's domain. In just a month, the 6 armies wiped out nearly 10 million undead creatures and gathered in Gloom City, surrounding the once most resplendent jewel of the Lordaeron continent. Looking at the dilapidated Lordaeron city, Mograine and the rest of the Lordaeron people sighed endlessly. Hurry up and attack Lordaeron city. Drag out a Nastrian who stole our Lordaeron's pearl and purify him. Mograine raised Ashbringer high, full of fighting spirit. However, Anduin waved his hand and pointed at the collapsed city wall. It's easy to take down Rotterdam city, but it's not easy to take down the newly built Gloomy city. Some people might ask, isn't this the same city? Of course not. The old Rotterdam city was mainly on the ground. However, the core buildings of the newly built Undercity were all underground. As a veteran commander, Mograine knew how cruel the street battles were when attacking a castle, not to mention an underground fortress. If this wasn't the capital of the Rotterdam Kingdom, he definitely wouldn't be willing to waste the lives of so many young people to attack. However, for the sake of the glory of the Rotterdam Kingdom, they had to fight no matter how difficult it was. Just as Mograine was about to order an attack, Queen Kalia appeared. Your Majesty. Mograine hurriedly bowed. Kalia said in her pleasant but firm voice. Alessandro, have you ever thought about the terrible consequences if the war turns into a tug of war? Every warrior who attacks the underground city will not be able to return. Their corpses will be desecrated, their souls will be forced to fall, and they will become part of the enemy. Mograine immediately felt bitter. Queen Kalia looked at the white city walls that had become extremely dilapidated. Seeing that the beautiful city that had nurtured countless generations of Rotterdam people had become extremely dilapidated, she gently stroked her chest. Beneath her muscles and bones, there was a heart that was aching. Arthas has already desecrated Rotterdam city once. Now the despicable Anastrian is doing it again. Not only did they desecrate the former capital of the Alliance, but they also want to turn this place into the scariest and dirtiest dark sanctuary. As a member of the Alliance, I will never allow such a thing to happen. Kalia took a document from the hands of the maid beside her, signed her name on it, and stamped it with the Queen's seal. She then handed a copy to Anduin, to Rayan and Mograine. In the name of the current Queen of Rotterdam, I agree that the Alliance will carry out carpet bombing of Rotterdam City. We will use all methods to deal with the undead under Rotterdam City. We must let every evil undead creature be purified by the holy light. Bombarding the capital of a united nation, even if it was once the capital, was not something that could be done casually. Without the consent of the suzerain, even if they managed to conquer it, there would be too much damage to the valuable ancient buildings. It would be a mess that was hard to clear up. Brothers might become enemies if things went wrong. However, it was not easy to attack this compound city with Rotterdam City above and Gloom City below. If they simply occupied the top, they would have to face the troops of the Forsaken who would come out of the endless secret tunnels to harm people. Every building, every alley, every corner could become a tunnel for the enemy to attack. In order to reduce unnecessary sacrifices, Duque convinced Kalia from the beginning. Then, a siege that subverted everyone's imagination began. First, there was the earth-shattering bombardment. Hundreds of battleships, 3 tank legions, and 5 artillery divisions, totaling more than 5,000 cannons of various calibers, poured all the cannons that the Alliance had accumulated for 13 years on Rotterdam City. The earth-shattering bombardment lasted for 3 days, until there was not a single pillar or wall that had not collapsed in the entire Rotterdam City. Then, thousands of armored vehicles, bulldozers, and grouting machines entered the battlefield. Even the chassis of the multi-purpose steam tanks were equipped with armor plates that were 30 centimeters thick. They covered the entire Rotterdam City with a meter of cement. Next, a total of 12 huge pile drivers were erected on the cement ground, and they were driving at the 12 o'clock position of the clock. They did not need the elevators that were originally equipped with in Gloom City, that had caused countless people to die. They opened a hole in Gloom City on their own. At the same time, it was also to guard against underground attacks. Once a hole was dug through, they would throw a large bag of bombs down and blow it up to their heart's content. However, the Alliance never sent an assault team down. 2 kilometers away from the original city wall of Rotterdam City, the steam tanks were working day and night to surround the entire Rotterdam city. Their goal was to dig a huge trench that was 50 meters deep and 30 meters wide to ensure that no undead could dig tunnels and escape. When carrying out that plan, Duque calculated according to the largest area of Gloom City in history. In fact, that was an extremely safe method. At this moment, the outermost underground wall of Gloom City was at least 2,000 meters away from the huge trench. Chapter 995. In the sky, griffins from the Eagle's Nest Mountain patrolled day and night. On the ground, the Watchtower Army, the Scarlet Cross Legion, the Storm Griffin Division, the Steel Stove Fort Tank Army, and 300,000 other Alliance elites were guarding the place. In the distance, to reduce the pressure on supplies, the Rotterdam Kingdom's militia had begun to retreat to Stratholm. The rest of the average Alliance army, under the leadership of generals such as Abendis and Gavin Rad, were clearing the remaining undead in the Tirisful woodlands. In the south, there were hundreds of warships. Under the water, there were the Murloc General Mager and the Naga General Wa, leading the 50,000 Murlocs and Naga army. There was no door to heaven and no road to hell. The entire Gloom City was tightly surrounded. When Sun King Anastrian knew that the entire Undercity was surrounded like an iron bucket, he was in despair. He couldn't even defeat the Alliance's mages if he fought them head-on. If he couldn't even defeat his only advantage, there was no need to talk about the others. He had indeed organized the destruction of those strange and shocking pile drivers time and time again. Unfortunately, the strange liquid rock, used by the Alliance, was soft at first, but soon became extremely hard. Even the crypt fiends, who were good at digging holes, couldn't easily break through 3 to 4 feet of rock. Usually, when his troops broke through to the ground, what awaited them was a circle of holy knights, sharp elven arrows, and countless cannons. If it was at night, there would be flares as bright as day. It was already March, and the Alliance's siege did not relax at all. It was like a noose, strangling the necks of the Forsaken. Even if they didn't need to breathe, they felt that their rotten heads would be twisted off at any time. Anastrian was in despair. His desire for power made him rebel against Arthas when the Lich King was weak. Now he and the Forsaken betrayed the Burning Legion and the Scourge Army at the same time. But the Alliance accurately seized the opportunity of their internal strife and attacked them fiercely. If it was too early, before he rebelled, Arthas would more or less support him. If it was too late, he would be able to completely subdue the 10 million undead. Unlike now, where the undead army had just gotten rid of the Lich who had chosen to pledge loyalty to the Lich King, the Alliance army had arrived. The undead army had no combat strength at all, and were directly destroyed and purified. The former Sun King once again felt the terror of Duque. Even if the former commander of the Alliance announced his retirement, the plan he left behind was still displaying a terrifying effect. In fact, Anastrian was overthinking things. Duke had never told anyone that the guild he was in before he transmigrated was called Punching Undercity, Stepping on Thunder Cliff. Of course, on the battlefield of Atlantis Mountain, the Horde guild that was the fiercest against him was Make All Alliance Girls Pregnant with Horde Children. As the destroyer of history, Duke simply could not tolerate the continued existence of the Forgotten Ones in the Rotterdam Kingdom and Quell the loss at the moment when the Rotterdam Kingdom and Quell the loss were being protected. In Duque's eyes, Nazul's betrayal was inevitable. If Anastrian jumped out as well, it would be even better. Hence, after winning against the Archerans, the Alliance had prepared 2 siege plans. Now they were lucky enough to use the perfect one. As long as the Undercity was torn down, Duque firmly believed that the Alliance would manage the entire Eastern Kingdom like an iron plate, and anyone who came would have to fight until their teeth were broken. On the 1st of April, the outer city of the Undercity, which was originally only 1/3 the size of the original history, had all fallen. The Alliance's frontline positions in the north, south, east, and west all had a powerful paladin and radiant moon mage in charge. The Forgotten Ones relied purely on a circular underground river that seemed to be full of green venom to protect the central city. At this time, Anastrian finally gave up hope and announced to give up the Undercity, retreating to the Kalimdor continent. At the moment when Duque was forced to temporarily become a priest, Anastrian was the strongest pharaoh in the world. If he wanted to open a portal and leave, no one could stop him. In fact, from the start of the war, the Alliance's military goals did not include killing Anastrian. You're leaving, right? I won't send you off. Of course, since the Forgotten Ones were destined to be the Alliance's enemies, the Alliance immediately launched a strong attack after sensing the spatial fluctuations. Multi-purpose steam tanks directly pushed a large number of sandbags into the Green River, set up pontoons, and the army directly pressed forward. After half a day of fighting, the Sun King, who was not in the mood to continue fighting, finally withdrew about 20,000 Forgotten Ones. Most of the Forgotten Ones were purified by the Alliance army. Long live victory! Long live Her Majesty Kalia Menethil! Lordaeron has been recovered. Long live the Alliance! Whose tears were flying? Whose cheerful laughter was reverberating in the air? No, it wasn't someone's. It was everyone's. It belonged to every member of the Alliance. Ever since Arthas killed his father and destroyed Lordaeron last year, followed by Archimonde's arrival, the entire Lordaeron continent, and even the world of Azeroth had suffered too much. Every living creature in the world was under the threat of death. The dark clouds of fear lingered above everyone's heads for too long. So long that they almost forgot what victory and safety felt like. Now Archimonde was dead. The undead that occupied the Lordaeron continent was wiped out. How could everyone not be wild with joy? On the ruins of Lordaeron, there were crowds of revelers everywhere. Humans held the arms of gnomes and raised them up high. Dwarves and elves competed in drinking. Everyone was reveling without a care in the world. On this day, with the recovery of Lordaeron, it was announced that there was no longer an organized Scourge army and Burning Legion in the entire Eastern Kingdom. This day was also designated as Victory Day by the people of Lordaeron. On the other hand, because everyone generally thought that Nazul was too stupid to betray the Burning Legion, and the second idiot, Anastrian, rebelled again, and it was the two idiots who fought together that allowed the Alliance to destroy the powerful undead army at a very small price. Everyone privately called this day April Fool. They used this to mock Nazul, who was trapped in Northrend, and Anastrian, who was in the Winterspring region of the Kalimdor continent. After the noisy banquet, the three Windrunner sisters, Jaina, Alicia, Kalia, and the rest gathered together. Aurelia raised her wine glass high. This is the victory that was achieved with the strategy that Duque left behind. This glass is for the man we love the most. Cheers! No matter how much alcohol they could drink, the six women drank it all in one gulp. Then they cursed inwardly, "Duque, you bastard, why haven't you died yet?" Chapter 996. However, there was still no news of Duque. Even when Aurelia tried to contact Alexstrasza and Nozdormu, she did not get a definite answer. The damage to spacetime has not been repaired. They can't come back for the time being. This was Nozdormu's answer under the Red Dragon Queen's interrogation. Time passed day by day. Due to the constant invasion of werewolves from the Silverpine Forest, the Alliance organized an encirclement in May. The effect was not very good. The werewolf disease was an infectious disease similar to the plague. Anyone who was bitten by a werewolf would become a werewolf. This was similar to the snowball tactics of the undead. If it was just to exterminate the werewolves, it would be easy. The problem was the strange characteristics of the Emerald Dream. After the Emerald Dream area that Aragorn used to make the werewolves sleep was opened, there was more than one exit. Werewolves could appear out of nowhere anywhere in the entire Silverpine Forest area. The werewolves constantly attacked the Alliance's supply team. As a result, the number of werewolves increased. In desperation, they could only announce a border blockade. Just like 13 years ago, the Alliance divided the Silverpine Forest border into the north and south. As a result, Gilneas, which was hanging on the cliff, became an independent country outside the Alliance. On the other hand, in view of Illidan's repeated troubles, the Alliance decided to reopen the Dark Portal and send an expeditionary force to see what kind of environment it was. After repeated discussions, this advance force of only 30,000 people was led by Gavin Rad, Danath Trollbane Kale, Bats and their followers who were eager to make a contribution. They began to kill their way into the Outland, which was now Draenor's Hellfire Peninsula, and built a forward base on the peninsula. However, due to unknown interference, the interstellar teleportation suddenly stopped after the advance force reached the opposite side of the dark portal. The Alliance had no choice but to announce that the advance force was missing. This year, the Alliance finally ended its state of war and returned to building peace. Due to Duque's warning before he left, no one dared to take it lightly. The Alliance began to secretly focus on the Blackrock Mountain between the Scorching Canyon and the Burning Steppes. Because according to Duque's prophecy, which was not a prophecy, the huge fire elemental force behind Baron Geddon, who had appeared in the Battle of Blackrock Mountain to scare people, would sooner or later come out to cause trouble, turning back time. 10,000 years ago in the distorted void, a certain Du shamelessly deceived the Eridar Gemini who claimed to be honest and reliable, saying that his name was Infernal Affairs. In fact, Duque was also afraid that the Eridar twins would see through his clumsy lie. But he had no choice but to gamble. Kil'jaeden was the most vengeful. In history, even if Archimonde knelt down, he would still tirelessly use all kinds of fancy methods to hunt down Nazul who dared to betray him. Although Duque was certain that no demon would know who Duke Marcus was 10,000 years ago, Duque was absolutely certain that if he dared to reveal his true name, it would definitely affect the spacetime 10,000 years later. Perhaps if he had returned to the time before the first battle at the Dark Portal, the Mediv possessed by Sargeras would have killed him as soon as he heard Duque's name. The only choice was to use a fake name. He had also considered the possibility of the Burning Legion seeing through his clumsy lie. After careful consideration, he felt that the possibility of being seen through was not high. It was very simple. If it was an important matter that could not be solved directly, perhaps it would require strategies and conspiracies. If it was the other way around, if a healthy adult wanted to crush an ant that had nowhere to run, would he spend the effort to set up a trap? Duque guessed that since the time he came to was before the Burning Legion's first invasion of Azeroth, it was very likely that this was a matter of selecting talents from conquered worlds. What was left of the worlds conquered by the Burning Legion? Not even a single hair was left. Kil'jaeden would constantly absorb races that he thought were strong to join the Burning Legion, such as the Abyss Lord and the Dreadlord. After all, those that he took a fancy to were few. Most of them were the members of the Burning Legion who had their home planets destroyed, and could not meet the official standards of the Burning Legion. In Kil'jaeden's eyes, those pitiful creatures that had their worlds destroyed, whether they were former guides or great traitors, were all of little value. They were just a little higher than ants, and could not enter his discerning eyes. Would such an existence have a very perfect record? Duque was the first to not believe it. Furthermore, because of his guilty conscience and afraid that Tyrande would find out, Duque had specially carried out a microplastic surgery on himself before he transmigrated. He had injected a large amount of holy light into his cheekbones and chin, stimulating the nearby muscle tissue to become red and swollen. This made his eyes more sunken, thinner, and scarier. Since he was not killed immediately after he woke up, it proved that the twins of Eridar did not have a complete list of names and appearances. With such a well-founded deduction, if Duque was still implicated, it could only be said that he was unlucky. Obviously, Duque had passed the test. Queen Saloras nodded, revealing a charming smile. Mr. Infernal Affairs, is it? You're not bad. Bring your servant and follow me. This is a direct order from Lord Kil'jaeden. If you do it well, you will definitely become an official member of the Burning Legion. Acting Emperor Duque showed an appropriate expression of ecstasy. I swear to serve the Burning Legion with my life. After that, Duke ran off to wake Master Howl up with a jolly look on his face. To show off his strength and also secretly cheat, Duque immediately used Mental Whip. This Shadow Priest's signature skill was not damage, but damage to the enemy's mind, weakening the enemy's will. This also made it convenient for Duque to turn the current situation into a mental transmission and directly enter Grom's mind. At least, Grom would not act recklessly. Grom woke up with a painful convulsion. His mind was in a mess, but long before he woke up, he had been told that they were deep in the enemy's territory and had to listen to Duque. Huff, huff. Huff! Grom, who was panting with his thick nostrils, felt a headache coming on. He did not know what to do in the ancient war 10,000 years ago. He had been hoping to listen to Duque, who knew that it would be such a lousy situation. Luckily, he had already broken free from the curse of Manarotha's demon blood, and was not as violent and impulsive as before. Otherwise, he was afraid that he would not be able to control himself and rush forward with blood roar. Feeling the gaze of the Eridar twins, Grom finally stepped onto the stage of an actor. He lowered his head, feeling a little fearful and uneasy. He deliberately asked, "Master of Infernal Affairs, what happened?" Acting Emperor Duque explained the situation to Grom seriously, then said, "Mantis Shrimp, let's go." Right. Mantis Shrimp was the fake name that Duque had given to the famous Grom Hellroar. Chapter 997. Grom Hell's Roar. A great hero who loved his tribe deeply, and was willing to fight to the death for it, was now experiencing the greatest and most terrifying psychological shock in history. As a pioneer who had been through countless battles, and had seen many different civilizations, Grom had never seen such terrifying technology before. Before him was the interior of a starship that was hundreds of thousands of square meters wide, with a 1,000-meter-tall dome. The architectural style inside was not unfamiliar to him at all. It was similar to the Shatrath city of the Drenii, which he had once destroyed. However, it was different from the flashy style of the Drenii, which was like a bubble that would shatter upon being smashed. The interior of the starship was filled with power. The power of dark powers. The power of darkness. He did not know what Duque had done before he woke up, but he knew very well that he owed Duque his life again. Because when he woke up, the creatures around him that were also asleep, or just about to wake up, were mercilessly abandoned. The flames of dark powers that he was not unfamiliar with sprang up from the floor like shackles, easily restraining the seemingly powerful creatures. There were 4 gorilla-like creatures as tall as him, with 4 arms. There were monsters that were as soft as mud, but occasionally had dozens of needles poking out of them. There were also humanoid creatures that looked like they were made out of platinum. All of them were emitting powerful energy waves. Contrary to Grom's expectations, the first thing that those seemingly powerful creatures did after waking up and realizing that they were under the threat of death was not anger, roaring, or pleading for their lives. Instead, they begged the 2 female demons who weren't that tall standing in front of Duke. All sorts of languages filled the air, but all of them expressed the same thing: submission and pleading. Grom suddenly realized that his soul had suffered a great shock. So many races, so many powerful beings, had willingly chosen to become slaves of the Burning Legion. Where was their glory? Where was their sense of self as a living being? No, none at all. Just like that. Even at the very end of their lives, they shamelessly kneeled and licked, craving for the mercy of these demons who had once destroyed their race and their home. In what felt like a few blinks of an eye, every single creature that was begging for mercy was reduced to dust. His body and soul had turned into pure dark energy. Their shouts were still echoing in Grom's ears, but in the next moment, they had already turned into balls of energy that supplied the operation of this evil starship. Grom's scalp was numb. The hands of this tribal warrior who had once killed the Abyssal Lord Manaroth with an axe were trembling. "Mantis Shrimp, let's go. You might even be able to see the Abyssal Lord Manaroth that you worship." Grom's body trembled. He finally realized that he had really returned to 10,000 years ago. This was because the Lord of the Abyss that he had personally killed was still alive and kicking at this point in time. He didn't know what Duque had done to ensure that he wouldn't lose his life the moment he woke up. But he knew that at a time like this, he could only choose to trust Duque. Otherwise, not just him, but the tides of history might be disrupted, leading to an even worse ending. For example, his home might be attacked by the Burning Legion in advance. Grom was not happy with the alias that Duque had randomly given him, so he bowed his burly body deeply. "As you wish, Master of Infinite Path." It had to be said that Grom's acting skills were terrible. He was about the same as those male idols in Duque's previous world who had no acting skills and got paid to film. But Duque had his ways. He smiled apologetically at the Eridar twins. "My apologies, esteemed ladies. This servant of mine has not been completely tamed, but I believe that he and I can be of help to the Great Burning Legion." Surprisingly, the Eridar twins didn't make things difficult for Duke and Grom on this issue. Soon the two of them knew why. Passing through a huge astrological hall with countless planets in it, Duque did not even explain which one was Azeroth to the country bumpkin Grom, who had never seen the stars beyond the atmosphere. But the planets in the starry sky array that were engulfed and burned by green evil energy still shocked Grom. And so, in silence, the two followed the twins to a huge room. The room gave Duque and Grom a bad feeling. In the rectangular room that was at least the size of 2 football fields, there was only a recliner that looked like an operating table in the middle. With a gentle wave of her left hand, a recliner immediately appeared. "Sit on it." Grom's facial muscles twitched slightly. It was too easy to think of all kinds of bad things. Duque was shocked. Yes, his shock was as unreasonable as a human swallowing an adult whale in one gulp. Unfortunately, Duque immediately felt the eyes of the 2 female demons locked on him. "This is..." Duque pretended to be suspicious. The Eridar twins' expressions were synchronized. They sneered at the same time. "The Burning Legion never believes in loyalty. We only believe in power." "Hiss," Duque gasped. He suddenly understood why the Eridar twins had never investigated his identity from the beginning, nor had they considered the question of his loyalty. Because there was no need. Looking at the huge syringe that rose from the back of the operating chair, and the churning green plasma, everything was explained. Grom's face suddenly became very interesting. As someone who had been troubled by the terrifying demon blood for the past 20 years, he knew what it was. That color, that taste, Grom would never forget it for the rest of his life. After all, what he drank was only the highly diluted demon blood of the Lord of the Abyss. The crazy impulse to destroy had made him forget himself. Once he entered the battle, he would lose most of his rationality. Other than his own people, he would cut down almost everything. He still remembered the earth-shattering massacre when the city of Shatrath was breached. Hundreds of thousands of Draenei were wiped out. A huge amount of blood gathered into a lake, forming a river that poured down. Grom did not dare to imagine what would happen if he touched this tube of demonic plasma that was obviously more concentrated than demon blood. But at that moment, countless apocalypse guards walked out of the darkness and surrounded the two of them. There was no way out. Was death the only way? Suddenly, Duque walked out and spoke in standard Eridar. "It's such a waste to give such a wonderful thing to my vulgar servant. Why don't you give it all to me?" Chapter 998. In his heart, Duke warmly cursed Nosdorm's 18 generations of ancestors, and sincerely offered the essence of 5,000 years of Chinese civilization to this bastard level 10086 dragon of time. All the words in his mind had been used by Duque more than 10 times. He could totally imagine Ronan, Krasis, Vanessa, and Brock singing and playing in the forest of Azeroth, then happily bumping into the demigod Cenarius and playing the game together. Why can these 4 guys choose the difficulty of the game? I'm playing hell mode right from the start? I, Duque, am the first to be dissatisfied. Alright, that's all. It's useless now. Nosdorm had sent Duque to the Burning Legion's nest, the Twisting Nether, and made Duque be surrounded by hundreds of millions of demons. The only way for Duque to survive was to find a way to enter the Earth Matrix and successfully teleport to Azeroth. For example, to gain Kil'jaeden's favor and become a part of Kil'jaeden's sinister plan. This caused Duque to pinch his nose and eat even though he knew that there was a bowl of hot sh*tea in front of him. He elegantly sat on the operating chair that was starting to change to fit Duque's body size. Duque gave Grom a look. "Trust me." Grom's heart jumped as he looked at Duque, and his mouth was filled with bitterness. Born in that primitive and barbaric world full of courage and heroism, Grom had always been proud of being a great orc. Orcs were the bravest race. Orcs were the greatest and most advanced race. From birth until he drank the demon's blood, Grom had always firmly believed in it. Until he saw other more brilliant civilizations, such as the Draenei, humans, dwarves, elves. When the orcs won, he never admitted that other civilizations were superior and more advanced than the orcs. But the cruel battle of Black Rock Mountain changed everything. In the face of the overwhelming artillery shells, the last of the orcs' elites were burned to the ground. The free and powerful orcs were reduced to slaves of the humans for as long as 12 years. When they regained their freedom while the Scourge army was wreaking havoc, they once again saw the violent artillery and mechanical civilization. Even the most arrogant orcs had to admit that in the field of civilization, the orcs had fallen far behind the other races. Under the leadership of Duque, the combat power of the alliance was far beyond that of the tribe. Grom didn't dare to imagine what would have happened if the Scourge and Burning Legion hadn't been pressured by the alliance. However, when he was teleported by Nozdormu to the Burning Legion's space battleship from 10,000 years ago, he finally realized a shameful fact. The Beastmen had completely fallen behind. Not to mention the advanced technology of the Burning Legion. Even compared to the alliance of 15 years after the Dark Portal, the Horde was simply primitive. After 13 years of guerrilla warfare in Tirisful Forest, Grom fully understood what it meant to be beaten if one lagged behind. He had asked himself countless times why he didn't die bravely, instead living in hell, oppressed by the humans and even the entire alliance. Eventually he came to a conclusion. In hell, there was a meaning to surviving, because only by surviving could the race reproduce. Only then would there be hope for the future. That was why living and fighting were meaningful. Grom survived the continuous deaths of his companions. He didn't rely on miraculous survival, but instead he carved out a bloody path with his axe. The sacrifice of his comrade had long since made Grom forget what tears were. Even though he would wake up in the middle of the night from the violent and bloodthirsty nightmares caused by the demonic blood, he couldn't deny that his actions were wrong. No matter how much pain he felt, no matter how he felt about this terrifying bloodline curse, only by fighting could he save his people and lead them to the path of the future. This bloody path was destined to be full of thorns. Perhaps he didn't know when he would be the only one left wandering at the gates of hell. He was glad that Thrall, the young and great chief who had helped the tribe rise again, had finally appeared. There were many times when he wanted to throw away the heavy responsibility on his shoulders and pass away peacefully with the beautiful expectations he had for the Beastmen. Looking at Orgrimmar rising from the ground, Grom only had one last wish left in his heart, to repay a favor from a human. Although that human was once the tribe's public enemy, he was also the greatest person. His greatness even transcended the boundaries of race and country. With the thought of repaying his debt, he had agreed to come to this damn 10,000 years ago and fight for a historical correction mission that seemed to have nothing to do with the Beastmen. But now he suddenly realized that he had a new responsibility on his shoulders. He had a responsibility. He had to tell Thrall about the terror of the Burning Legion that he had seen with his own eyes. He had to tell the entire tribe. In order to achieve this goal, he had no choice but to personally witness his benefactor, right in front of him, shouldering another disaster for him. Grom's strong arms struggled and his mouth twitched. His sharp fangs clattered, not because of fear, but because of excitement. Yes, he owed Duque another life. Even though he had seen with his own eyes how Duque had forcefully converted Archimonde's evil curse power into holy light, it did not erase the guilt in his heart. Grom knew very well what would happen once such a high-purity evil power entered his body. But Duke smiled and plucked away the despair that should have belonged to his Grom. He did not say a word, just a proud look. It was as if Duque was saying, "You want to corrupt me? Even 100 times more won't be enough." Duque lay down with a smile, and then made countless plans in his mind. In the deepest part of his heart, he built layer after layer of mental defenses. Come on! Best actor Duque had a fanatical expression on his face, as if he was willing to sacrifice his body for the Burning Legion. That was the desire for power. That was the worship of the strong. The Eredar twins, who could not read Duque's mind at first, finally looked satisfied. That's right, this was the expression that a bunch of useless followers should have. The huge and terrifying needle pierced directly into Duque's heart, and the high purity of evil power that would make a large number of Apocalypse guards jealous was injected into Duque's heart drop by drop. Aha! Even the gentle Duque could not suppress the violent reaction in his body and let out a bestial roar. Nozdormu, I will castrate you when I get back. Chapter 999. Warning. Warning. The host's body is experiencing a strong depravity reaction. Please activate light-darkness attribute conversion as soon as possible. Otherwise, the upper limit of the host's moral integrity is likely to be permanently reduced. In Duque's spiritual sea, the system genie's alarms were ringing incessantly. The alarms were so loud that it almost drove Duque crazy, but Duque could only choose to turn them off. He had no choice. This was the Burning Legion's lair. Not to mention the sinister and vengeful kill, Jaden was commanding the fleet at the moment. Even Sargeras, who had been killed by Duque, and Archimonde, who had just fallen on Mount Hyjal, were still alive and kicking in the Burning Legion's space fleet at this point in time. Turning darkness into light? What a joke! Did he not see how Kill Jaden and Archimonde had hunted down Willan and the Dreenii for countless centuries in revenge for the betrayal of Willan, one of the 3 leaders of Eridar? If Duque dared to show even the slightest bit of transformation, he would immediately be sent to the dissection table. Warning. Warning. As the host's moral integrity, humanity, is about to break through the lower limit, one or more of the negative spiritual characteristics that were once suppressed will randomly appear. Seeing this, Duque immediately cursed in his spiritual sea. Bastard. Why did I make so many protective walls in the spiritual world? Sorry, host. Your spirit and soul still exist based on your body. The condition of the body will in turn affect the spirit. You can't expect to have your best spirit when your stomach is hungry. Duque was silent. In the silence, with some fear in his heart, he watched as more green dark energy entered his heart. Duque was unlucky, because he was sold to this damn place. Even if he repeatedly vowed to teach Nosdorm a lesson, even if he swore 1,000,000 times that he would kill every last member of the Burning Legion, he could not change the fact that he was now unlucky. Duque was lucky. The essence of dark energy was the dark power that destroyed life and soul. It was the greatest collection of all negative states. This was because Duque had subconsciously isolated his 5 senses from his mind and body, so that he could not feel the endless burnt stench of death impacting his sense of smell. There was no need to know the torturous torture of the body when the evil energy was injected into the body, or how horrifying the pain it brought to the sense of touch. He would also not suffer a double blow to his hearing and soul, because of the despair and anguished wails of the countless races and living beings who were destroyed before they died. They wouldn't even see the tragic visions of those unlucky souls before they died. What Duque had to face was the various psychological impulses brought about by the high-purity dark energy. However, this was not going to be easy. In the virtual illusion, Duque had already begun to fight against all kinds of negative impulses. He created a fake version of himself eating 10,000 Big Macs to counter gluttony. He dealt with the greed in his heart by robbing the American Express 1,000,000 times. He slept in the illusory world for 10 million years to complete his sloth. He fought an endless war with the teacher in the 10 terabytes porn to resolve his Shirin desire. In the end, he beat up the Burning Legion's big 3 10,000 times, and then turned them into ashes 100 million times to vent his wrath. In the outside world, Grom watched anxiously as Duque's body convulsed in the dark energy solution. He could not imagine what Duque had to face in the spiritual world. But as he listened to Duque's bones and saw Duque's body expand to the size of 2 people, it was not hard to imagine how much pain Duque was suffering at the moment. However, on the other hand, he could also see some clues from the horrified expressions of the Burning Legion's demons. Crazy! Crazy! This is crazy! Did we get the purity wrong? How can a lowly creature contain so much dark energy? Aura's face was full of disbelief. This is impossible. Do you think we are all blind? That is enough to create 100 demon lords. Queen Saloras gritted her teeth. Could it be that this mysterious human is especially good at containing dark energy? Are you kidding me? There can't be such an existence. But the amount of dark energy he absorbs is far beyond the level of a normal lord. It's almost at the level of a commander. Aura's looked like she was about to cry. The Erida Gemini could not imagine what it would be like to have a 4th Big 3 in the Burning Legion. At that moment, the syringe that was being pressed in suddenly stopped. The Erida Gemini saw this and finally stopped the horror in their hearts. After all, this meant that Duque's total dark energy was at most half of a commander-level demon. In fact, it was not even half. Because the next second, Duque's eyes suddenly opened. Without any warning, all the pores on his body opened at the same time, spewing out turbid dark energy gas mixed with green and black. At that moment, the surging green gas turned into a huge shockwave and first sent all the middle-level demons closest to Duque flying. Then suddenly, the Apocalypse Guards howled in pain as they knelt on the ground. It was not that Duque directly attacked them, but they were all burned by the ultra-high-density dark energy gas that Duque spewed out. Air could be used as an air cannon to kill enemies when it was 10 times or 100 times concentrated. Not to mention that this was a high-energy dark energy. As if they were splashed with sulfuric acid, the Apocalypse Guards' bodies started to corrode. The thick scales on the skin of these powerful demons, as well as the steel-hard cuticle, all melted away like wet toilet paper. Grum looked at all of this in shock. Fortunately, before the shockwave reached him, the Erida Gemini who was watching over him pressed a button on a pillar that rose from the ground. A powerful ventilation system was activated, and in an instant, the ultra-high-density dark energy gas was drawn out of the hall. Even so, more than 100 Apocalypse Guards had been killed. This was the Twisted Void, and the demons that died here were dead. They could no longer be resurrected. The Erida Gemini's expression was very interesting. There was shock, horror, and a hint of anticipation. On the operating table in the middle of the hall, an object that looked like Duque slowly stood up. It did not look any different, but the powerful evil aura that came rushing at them told the Erida Gemini. A new elite demon lord was born. Chapter 1000. Initially, the Burning Legion was the fallen titan Sargeras. It was only after Sargeras brought Kil'jaeden and Archimonde into the pit 25,000 years ago that the Burning Legion came into being. Since that day, Kil'jaeden had not stopped adding new races to the Burning Legion. After all, the Eridar race was strong, but they were not invincible. It was a waste to use the pure-blooded Eridar race as war consumables. That was how the Doomguards, Lords of the Abyss, Dreadlords, Cerberus and other races, as well as evil magic creations such as Hellfire came into being. It was easy to measure the status of a race. It was to see if the race had a peerless elite who could perfectly absorb dark powers. And now there was one more. A human elite from the Andromeda star with Mass Effect. A moment ago, Duque was still a pawn who could let the Eridar twins rule over his life. But now he was a peerless elite that even Gemini had to treat with respect. Thud. Duque stomped on the ground. His legs had grown a lot longer, and he seemed to have lost his balance. Duque snorted, and right in front of Gemini, Duque quickly reverted to his original size at a speed visible to the naked eye. After a layer of black mist surrounded him, Duque took out the robe he had prepared and put it on. From the looks of it, Duque seemed to have turned back into the somewhat powerful shadow priest from before. Even the violent and tumbling dark power was quickly withdrawn. Gemini's face was once again filled with shock. The Burning Legion had started their expedition 15,000 years ago, and they had seen as many elites as the stars in the sky. But it was rare to see someone like Duque, who could completely control the power the moment he gained it. Most of the powerful creatures relied on their strong physique and large size to forcibly absorb the dark powers into their body and temporarily store it. They did not really digest it. For example, the Lords of the Abyss. All of them had energy leakage, and their high-energy reactions could be easily sensed from thousands of meters away. Who would be like Duque, who directly refined the dark powers and fused it with his own soul, and then kept a low profile and withdrew it. Elite. Absolute elite. Thinking of the plan that their boss was about to carry out, Gemini's heart suddenly became fervent. Originally, the selection this time was just a small game played out of boredom. They did not expect to gain anything from it. Who would have thought that they would obtain a Lord-class powerhouse? Compared to male devils, female devils were more cunning, vicious, and merciless. The Eridar twins changed their expressions on the spot. They sauntered over to Duque with their mesmerizing cat-like steps, showing off the beautiful curves of their bodies. Yo! Congratulations! You are now the Lord of the Infernal Underworld. the high-rank warlock Aura spoke first. How are you going to thank us, sisters, for the benefactors who discovered you? When Queen Salola spoke, her charming smile and seductive tone made it impossible for people to feel that she was asking for benefits. Instead, it gave people the illusion that she was asking for favor. Duque's face, which was filled with pain just a moment ago, also immediately wore a smile. Just as he was about to speak, the door to the hall was rudely pushed open. Bang! Accompanied by the sound of an explosion and dust, a huge devil appeared in front of the group of devils. The lower body of a dragon and the upper body of a fat human formed a sharp contrast. Duque and Grom's pupils suddenly shrank. Damn, it's really an old friend. It's actually the Lord of the Abyss, Manaroth. He brought a few Lords of the Abyss over. Hehe. You're the new Demon Lord? You don't seem very strong. Luckily, I rushed over after sensing the energy waves. Come fight with me. If you lose, you'll be my servant. After saying that, Manaroth grinned and revealed his terrifying fangs. He raised his right arm and forcefully slammed the huge double-headed sword into the ground. The metal floor of the hall immediately let out a shocking roar. Queen Salola's was furious. What a bastard. The lord that she had just nurtured was snatched away by a boorish lord of the abyss just like that. However, as Archimonde's direct subordinate, Manaroth could really ignore the Gemini, who was Killjaden's adjutant. On the contrary, it was Elise's who grabbed her good friend. A demon who can prove himself is a real demon. Thinking of this, Salola smiled. Yes. If he was a weakling who was defeated by his comrade, in one move, it was not worth investing in. Although Manaroth was strong, he was also a very good touchstone. If this infernal one did not lose, or even not lose too badly, then he would definitely gain a foothold in the Burning Legion. Thinking of this, Salola's smile became even brighter. Your Excellency, Infernal One, it seems that you need to prove yourself immediately. Duque smiled. No problem, this is for the Burning Legion. Just like that, Duque, dressed in a black robe, walked slowly to stand 20 meters in front of Manaroth. Considering that he was going to face the Burning Legion in this 10,000-year time travel, Duque did not wear any of the equipment that he had obtained from Mount Hyjal. He did not have a strong physique, nor did he have any decent equipment. He looked extremely shabby, to the extent that it would affect the appearance of the city. The Apocalypse Guards, who did not have high hopes for Duque, suddenly burst into laughter, and then roared in unison. Kaladu. In other words, it was kill. 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 Meant. Every demon longed to see a bloodthirsty, blood-boiling battle. At the very least, a cruel and terrifying slaughter was not a bad thing. The Apocalypse Guards had completely forgotten who had just burned so many Apocalypse Guards to death with just a low-purity demonic aura. Duque did not say a word. He raised his right hand and hooked his index finger at Manaroth. Everyone understood what he meant. Come. Don't look down on me. Manaroth was furious. He was really furious. He stomped on the ground with his 4 claws, and with a violent and visually shocking attack, he crossed the distance of 20 meters. It was a terrifying slash that could easily cut 10 Apocalypse Guards in half, and it almost split the Dark Void in half. At this critical moment, when Grom was so nervous that his heart was about to leap out of his throat, dozens of long black chains suddenly appeared in the air. As Duque grinned mysteriously, he spat out a few words between his white teeth. Mental Lash, Ultimate. Chapter 1001. At first, Manaroth did not pay much attention to the seemingly weak dark energy whips. From his point of view, it was just a meaningless display. His charge and cleave could destroy everything with brute force. He immediately realized that he was wrong. Furthermore, he was ridiculously wrong. The whips condensed from dark energy were so pure that even the knowledgeable Eridar Gemini was speechless. They were illusory energy bodies that were weaker than gas, but in less than 1,000th of a second, they condensed again and again, turning into black substance that was frighteningly bright even in the dark. 100 times harder than steel. 1,000 times stronger than rubber bands. Their unreasonable strength and tenacity held Manaroth back, even though he was in a frenzied state. She grabbed his arm, jamming his elbow. strangling his throat, locking his limbs. The whips of dark power that came from all directions out of nowhere actually stopped the top lord of the abyss, whose weight was measured in tons, as if he had been frozen on the spot, as if he had been turned into a fossil. The gigantic splitting mountain sword was clearly just a centimeter away from cutting Duke's body, cutting this seemingly weak body in half with a single slash. But so close yet so far away. When Manaroth roared and used all his strength, Manaroth shouted. When he roared in anger and wanted to burn his life and soul, when all his strength and the dark energy in his body were exhausted, he still could not move an inch forward. In front of the calm Duque, he was worse than an oversized clown. He was like a bug that knew it was a spider web but still ran into it. It was a joke. He was furious. He cursed. But he did not know that the name of this move was Extreme Mental Whip, and not Binding of Darkness. The pain that surpassed his physical body had already arrived. It was just that the pain was so intense that it instantly burned all the pain nerves in the area where he was bound. He did not feel any pain in his intense struggle. But the next moment, a pain that came from his soul came from every corner of his soul. He finally realized that something was wrong. It was a pain that surpassed all his previous experiences, and all his imagination. That was the most extreme and terrifying pain that could almost burn his brain to a crisp. No, It was a despair and pain that even his soul, which he believed to be indomitable, would tremble in fear and submit to. Perhaps the pitiful wretches who had angered the 3 titans of the Burning Legion, and had their souls imprisoned and roasted for 1,000 years had suffered such a tragic fate. Manaroth, who was famous in the entire army for being able to fight and not afraid of death, had his 4 relatively short hooves give way at the same time. His belly was stuck to the ground as he fainted. Moreover, there was a foul stench coming from the back half of his abdomen. That's right, because this fellow's body model leaned more towards that of a draconic human. His stomach just so happened to be too big, like a roly-poly doll. Just like that, his head slumped dejectedly on his thick neck, his eyes rolling back. My lord! The lords of the abyss turned pale with fright. Magtheridon, who was at the front, brandished his double-headed sword and rushed over to help. Humph! A cold snort. A green shadow rose from the ground and rushed into the sky. In less than a second, it drew an extremely unscientific triangle in the air. It was a flash of mournful red light. It was violent and filled with an unparalleled sense of power, compared to the violent momentum of the Lord of the Abyss's charge. This scarlet axe was even more unreasonable. Even though Grom was only 1/10 of Magtheridon's size, he had the weird special skill, Lord of the Abyss specialization. One blood roar was enough to teach Magtheridon a lesson. The meter-thick super-alloy plate was directly smashed by the axe. Magtheridon was like a pale little girl as he let out an unscientific scream and retreated in panic. King against king. General against general. It seemed like the Lord of the Abyss's side was completely defeated. Duque waved his finger lightly, wanting to end this troublemaker Manaroth. Suddenly, an incomparably powerful will descended. It was a terrifying will that was so huge that it felt like the entire universe was in his hands. A cold glint flashed in Duque's eyes. He waved his finger, and the dark power that bound Manaroth's body suddenly increased. At this moment, most of the spectating demons could not help but change their expressions. This infernal affairs really dared to kill? Humph! A cold snort came from the void. Then a super-large sword wrapped in blue flames slashed down from the sky, about to cut Duque's dark whip. However, at the very last moment, Duke put on a frightened look and only withdrew his energy the instant before the flaming saber arrived. Oh no! Oh no! Even if he kept telling himself that this was 10,000 years ago, when the Burning Legion was at its most powerful, when Duque saw Archimonde's green face run out to scare people, he still felt like he did not press the lid of his coffin properly, and let Ak run out. Who are you? Who gave you the right to kill my vanguard general? Archimonde's shadow seemed to be unable to suppress his anger. Lord Archimonde. As Lord Kil'jaeden's direct subordinate, I don't think I have to tolerate Manaroth's provocation, right? Duque did not back down at all. Instead he rebuked Archimonde. In the Burning Legion, the one with the biggest fist was the boss. However, it was also relative. Since ancient times, this kind of thing happened in any large organization. Anyway, Duque had defeated Manaroth in one move and displayed his value. He dared to bet with his integrity that Kil'jaeden would definitely not bear to let the best newcomer of the year be killed by Archimonde in a daze. As expected, in less than half a second, Kil'jaeden's huge image suddenly appeared behind Duque. Hee. Don't be angry, Archimonde. Isn't it just a sparring session? Didn't your Vanguard official not die? Hearing this, Duque heaved a sigh of relief. He was a talent that Eridar Gemini had discovered. As Kil'jaeden's aide-de-camp, how could these two wicked demonesses let go of this opportunity to claim credit? Needless to say, they must have called Kil'jaeden over. So Kil'jaeden came out to smooth things over, and Duque was not surprised at all. Humph. Archimonde gave Duque a hard stare. He would never have dreamed that 10,000 years later, it would be this little bastard in front of him who gave him the final blow. Of course, the guilty Duque had already changed his appearance before he transmigrated. Coupled with the large amount of high-purity dark energy he had absorbed, he had changed his appearance so much that Archimonde would not be able to recognize him 10,000 years later. Even if he saw him yesterday, he would not be able to recognize him. Chapter 1002. Archimonde, of course, could not do anything when a big boss of the same status as him came to smooth things over. What made Archimonde even more depressed was that Duque was clearly not the kind of demon lord who would face him head-on. He did not even have the chance to say that his hands were itchy. As one of the big bosses, he could not possibly be so thick-skinned, right? A snort was already his limit. In a group of demons, one could never expect everyone to live harmoniously like brothers. Not fighting each other was already the greatest restraint. Duque's control over this was simply perfect. How much Archimonde disliked Duque was how much Kil'jaeden admired Duque. Ever since he met the Eridar twins, Duque had never thought of relying on the brave Archimonde, not even for a short period of time. The move to kill just now was also an act by Duque. This was his proof of allegiance to Kil'jaeden, the chairman egg. Now that he had a proof of allegiance, the chairman egg would accept it. Of course, he would want some rewards for Duque. The red chairman egg smiled and said, "The Burning Legion does not raise useless people. Similarly, every demon must be responsible for their actions. Since Manaroth provoked and failed, shouldn't we give him some rewards?" Humph. After another cold snort, Archimonde's huge blue and green figure disappeared on the spot. Duque's eyes narrowed into a line. He was also very curious about what kind of rewards there would be. The Eridar twins twisted their soft waists. Like the same person in the mirror, they walked over from left and right in sync and placed their hands on Duque's shoulders. This is the rule for the Burning Legion's Lord level and above demons. The winner can obtain a Lord level item from the loser. Aura said with a smile. What if the loser can't give it? Duque touched his chin and said thoughtfully, "Then you will become the item that was lost." Queen Solola's eyes were seductive. Then you will become the item that was lost. Hee, so that's how it is. Interesting. The high-rank warlock auras continued. All demons who have just become lords and have yet to prove themselves are low-rank lords. Because Manaroth is challenging you as a junior lord, he has to pay 4 times the price. Solola's pointed at Magtheridon, who was bitterly clutching his broken breastplate and trying to make himself less conspicuous. Including Magtheridon, there are still 4 lower-tier lords who have just attacked or are preparing to attack. Middle tier was twice as powerful. In other words, you and your servant can obtain a total of 8 pieces of lord equipment. Magtheridon's face turned green. He looked at his boss Manaroth, who was still unconscious, and threatened. Spies, right? Don't be too pleased with yourself. Let me tell you, if you dare to ask us for our collection, we will be enemies. If you can forget what happened today, you will gain the friendship of the Abyssal Lords. When Duque heard this, he suddenly felt like laughing. Laugh if you want to. Who cares if you're an Abyssal Lord or an Abyssal Turtle? Ha 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 ha. Duque's unbridled and arrogant laughter echoed in the dark hall. It was like 2 huge palms slapping the faces of the Abyssal Lords. Every large abyssal lord's face was burning. Their muscles kept bulging and relaxing, looking like a unicorn's arm acting up. It was extremely laughable. You don't regret this. We are the strongest vanguard of the Burning Legion. Magtheridon no longer had much confidence. Duque burst out laughing. His arrogant voice had an indescribable demonic charm. Why should I please some trash who can't even defeat me? At first, you wanted to enslave me, but when you can't defeat me, you want to reconcile with me? How can it be so easy? Duque's eyes sharpened. He gently pushed away Eridar's hands that were on his shoulders and took 3 big steps forward. Hand over 8 items that my servant and I can use. Otherwise, I will take them from your corpses. It was in line with the rules, no problem. Moreover, Duque had never thought of joining the Burning Legion. Was he supposed to be like those trash who shouted, "Of course I forgive you," after being cuckolded? Bullsh *T. Of course I'll take some and leave. I'm going to kill your entire family anyway. I don't care if you hate me or not. Duque was filled with murderous intent. Not only was he in the right, but his fists were also especially big. Not to mention how bitter Magtheridon looked. Something interesting happened again. None of the Abyssal Lords dared to touch the unconscious Manoroth's bag. Instead, a few of them gathered a bunch of items that Duque and Grom could use. Duque was slightly shocked. So the items of a servant belonged to the master? They were probably certain that Manoroth would still exploit them after waking up, so they contributed from the start. At least they wouldn't be punished by their master. Looking at the pile of epic equipment that was emitting a noble purple glow, Duque had to admit that killing and arson was the fastest way to get rich since ancient times. However, these Abyssal Lords had robbed countless planets to get their hands on top-grade equipment, and now they were all in Duque's hands. It was worth mentioning that the good items of Magtheridon and the others were slightly different from the original ones in history. They were not slightly lower than Mount Hyjal's, but on the same level. This made Duque feel a little more excited. Apart from the pieces of equipment he got from Nethario, this was the best equipment he could get his hands on at the moment. Duque did not hesitate to choose a crystal pulse staff first. That's right, he had Argus Apostle before, but the problem was that it was Archimond's treasure. Duque did not know if Archimond already had this thing 10,000 years ago. If he did, then Duque would be courting death by taking it out. At the moment when he urgently needed to increase his combat power, the Crystal Pulse Staff was a good transition. Anyway, there were only 5 suitable items, so it would be a waste not to take them. The Abyssal Hunter's Cloak and the Soul Eater's Gauntlet were 2 pieces of cloth armor. The key was the 2 magnificent Abyssal Lord's pockets, which were 2 high-level spatial bags with a space of 200 cubic meters. It was completely different from the old Azeroth goods that Duque had used before, which were only 5 cubic meters in size. He did not expect to get such a reward from dealing with Manoroth. Duque laughed so hard that his stomach cramped. On the other hand, Grom had obtained 3 pieces of plate armor, which happened to be different from the ones he had obtained before. If he could return alive, he would definitely be able to create a set of gorgeous equipment that would blind most of the warriors of the tribe. Chapter 1003. A group of demons looked at him with jealousy and hatred as he collected his spoils of war. And the same group of demons looked at him with even more jealousy and hatred as the demonic craftsman forged his spoils of war into a suitable size, and then equipped it on the spot. Even the cost of adjusting the equipment was paid by the sullen lords of the abyss. Not to mention the sour feeling in Duque's heart. He had slapped the demon in the face. He had snatched the demon's best. And he had even shamelessly asked for a receipt and 3 guarantees of after-sales service. This was the so-called despicable and despicable act. If Duque had really become a demon from today onwards, then it would have been fine. But the problem was that he had been prepared to run from the start. Of course, Grom, who still had no idea what Duque was up to, was very depressed. He did not even know if Duque had really fallen. Originally, the Eridar Gemini's eyes had lit up when they saw Grom, who had almost crippled Magtheridon with an axe, and subtly suggested that Grom should also try his dark powers. But Duque had used the excuse that lower races do not deserve to enjoy dark powers to gloss over it. The Gemini did not force Duque any further. Firstly, Grom was Duque's servant-slave. Secondly, perhaps he thought that Duque wanted to consolidate his power and position? Jealousy and being wary of his underlings were things that any smart Eridar demon would do. The Gemini smiled and did not continue the topic. Then, Duque was led to an independent, sealed room. It was a huge space of 100 square meters, and there was only one luxurious chair in the middle of the room. Calling it a chair was not really appropriate, as the entire chair was made out of high-purity dark power that was so dense that it was almost tangible. It was more like an exaggerated, spiritual transmission system. Under the Gemini's guidance, Duque sat on it, and the next moment he found that his consciousness had been transferred to a huge hall. It was a huge fan-shaped space of over 1,000,000 square meters. At first glance, it looked like an opera house. However, there were only 3 gigantic chairs on the platform, which were obviously for the Burning Legion's 3 powerhouses. Then, from the narrow end of the fan-shaped room, Duque saw a 4-digit number of chairs, or rather cushions. His current position happened to be slightly behind the middle section of the fan. Sololaz's voice rang in Duque's ears. This is the Temple of Demons, the core of the Burning Legion. As you have successfully defeated the High Lord Manaroth, you have been promoted from a beginner lord to an intermediate lord. If you want to advance further, you must make a great contribution, and prove your loyalty to the army. After you prove your loyalty, you can officially reincarnate as a vassal of our noble Eridar clan. Your soul will be bound to the twisting nether, and you will enjoy eternal life. As long as you don't die in the twisting void, your soul can return here and resurrect infinitely. When Duque heard this, he was instantly excited. Not because of eternal life, but because he had been worried for a long time that he had to bind his soul in advance. This loophole was not deliberately left behind by the Burning Legion. They just never thought that there would be a creature in this world that could resist such terrible mental corruption. In the eyes of Sargeras and the Eridar clan, anyone who could withstand such a large amount of dark energy and become a lord would already be a miracle if they did not fall into madness. Generally speaking, such a person would be given the responsibility of a commander. Who would have thought that there would be someone who could resist the brainwashing and secretly convert dark energy? So in their eyes, Duque was a cooked duck that could not fly away. Eternal life was, of course, a deceptive thing to be used as bait to tempt the strong newbies who had just joined the army. As for resurrecting in the twisting void and falling into a weakened state, other demons would find trouble with him, and he might even become a slave beast. Do you expect the demons to be kind enough to tell you the truth? After the introduction of the benefits, it was time to work. Without giving Duque time to rest, Kil'jaeden summoned Duque. It was a house burning with a raging fire. Kil'jaeden was red all over, and his lower body was bathed in boiling magma. His body was more than 15 meters tall, and easily occupied most of the room. Duque stood in the middle of the room, standing at the end of the peninsular-shaped passage that only extended to Kil'jaeden's chest. Looking up at Kil'jaeden, Duque felt a little pain in the ass. Nothing else, it was too close. Looking up at Boss Egg's scarlet demon face that was made up of 3 flexible tentacles at such a close distance, it was a disgusting feeling. It was like spending a lot of money to watch an IMAX movie, only to sit in the first row and spit at the alien show. The feeling of being burnt on the outside and tender on the inside was really unpleasant. Unfortunately, Duque, who was pretending to be an obedient child, could only pinch his nose and accept it. Dark in his shadow form, Duque stared at the egg with a slightly timid gaze as he pretended to be calm, and said, "The great Kil'jaeden, what brings you here?" Who knew Boss Egg would immediately say, "Despicable bug. How dare you lie to me?" Duque's body trembled, and he almost peed his pants. The great Kil'jaeden. I didn't. This time it wasn't an act. Duque was really scared. Humph. You still dare to say you didn't. There's no Andromeda star effect at all. Who hearing this, Duque was instantly relieved. The true colors of the best actor were revealed once again. Duke's mouth moved as if he was probing. The planet I was born on was just an inferior world with a low civilization. The Great Burning Legion destroyed my world in one day. Mass Effect planet is just what my lowly race and I call it. I don't know what the Great Burning Legion called my world. Is there a misunderstanding? Kil'jaeden was speechless. The Burning Legion was the most brutal existence in the universe, the most terrifying violent organization. The number of planets and races they had destroyed was more than 10 million. Even if their subordinates reported, they would usually destroy an entire star system. Even someone as meticulous and cunning as Kil'jaeden couldn't possibly know what kind of culture each planet had, and what the inferior races called their home. The egg would never pay attention to planets that were easily destroyed. Generally speaking, knowing how much resources were taken from planets that were easily destroyed was already the limit of the egg's memory. Kil'jaeden was actually just trying to scare Duque. Seeing that this new Lord-level vassal creature was sufficiently humble towards him, Kil'jaeden was relieved. Chapter 1004. Kil'jaeden was a big boss who had a lot of things to deal with every day. He didn't have the time to beat around the bush with Duke. After all, Duke was one of them, so he went straight to the point. I'm here to give you a mission. Go to a planet called Azeroth and open a portal that allows the entire army to pass through. As long as you complete this, not only will you be able to bind your soul to the twisting nether, but you will also be able to choose one item from my collection as your family heirloom. Hearing this, Duque was so happy that his heart was about to fly out of his chest. Damn, he was finally sure that that bastard Nozdorma did not send him at the wrong time. It was indeed the eve of the ancient war 10,000 years ago, and if he was not wrong, he was very likely to replace Manarotha's position. Although he was happy, Duque showed another characteristic. I promised to complete the mission. I only have one small question. You ask, I may not answer. Kil'jaeden showed enough arrogance. I want to ask, sir, did you give me your reward the moment I opened the portal? Duque rubbed his hands, his face full of eagerness like the greediest goblin. This time, Duque's desire was not fake. According to normal history, he would only have the chance to overthrow Kil'jaeden and snatch his mother after at least 10 years. He did not expect to have the chance to get Dandan's collection in advance. It would be strange if Duque was not tempted. This kind of undisguised greed made Kil'jaeden admire him greatly. Haha. The Burning Legion is never stingy with rewards. As long as the portal you open is large and stable enough, when the main force of the Burning Legion's first fleet enters Azeroth, how about I reward you with 3 treasures? Then it's a deal? Kil'jaeden seemed to be satisfied with this meeting. He waved his hand, and a scorching fen wind rose in the room. If the dark force surrounding Duque was slightly weaker, Duque would have been a charred corpse by now. You have my promise. Go and rest first. You also need to adapt to the sudden increase in power in your body. My aide will give you the details tomorrow. Duque bowed deeply to Dandan and retreated. The moment Duque retreated, the Eridar twins appeared on the 2 floating platforms. What do you think? Kil'jaeden put on a fake smile. Every breath he took was accompanied by a huge amount of flames. Smart, sharp, ruthless, insightful, and shrewd. If he's from the Eridar tribe, then he'll definitely be an outstanding demon, Alyssa said. One thing to note, he's very greedy. I sense that he had an almost twisted obsession with exquisite equipment. Queen Solola's let out a pleasant chuckle. Not only that, although he hid it well and never dared to look us in the eye, I'm sure that he wants to enslave us. Auras also chuckled. Ha! Ha 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 ha. Kil'jaeden laughed maniacally. His laughter was so loud and terrifying that it actually shattered the decorations in the hall, and the stone pillars hanging at the top of the hall. They fell into the lava pool and splashed high into the air. The Eridar twins bowed at the same time with a charming smile on their faces. Those inferior races that were destroyed by our hands call us demons. Since we're demons, what's wrong with being greedy? What's wrong with destroying? What's wrong with trying to dominate everything in the world? Remember, it's never desire that's wrong. The only mistake is that you don't have enough power to satisfy your own desire. Ha 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 ha. The twins lowered their heads even more. They had already confirmed that their master had a good impression of the new lord of the inferior race, the infernal affairs. However, as a demon commander who was good at scheming, Kil'jaeden was never stingy with his generous rewards. as long as you could complete his extremely harsh requirements. Furthermore, how could demons put all their eggs in one basket? On the other side, he retreated from the reception room. Under the guidance of a succubus, Duque first rejected the succubus' invitation to spend a wonderful night together, then directly returned to the suite that was arranged for him. In the living room that was filled with a sci-fi atmosphere, he saw the anxious Grom Hellscream. Infernal affairs. Master. Lord Howl, who was never a qualified actor, clearly knew that he was acting, called the Master in an extremely obscure manner. Duque's face was cold as he proudly replied, "Mantis Shrimp, I know that you've never accepted me. You don't recognize me as your master. This doesn't matter. I will make you kneel down in front of my power one day with a wholehearted heart. No matter what you want to ask, I don't have the time to answer you. Right now, I've received a mission from one of the highest commanders of the Burning Legion, Sir Kil'jaeden. I need to go to Azeroth. If you have any questions, go to Azeroth and talk." With that, Duque flicked his sleeves and left in a domineering manner. His left hand pressed on the spherical button on the side of the door, and the glass-like sphere emitted a burst of green light. Then the door to the bedroom opened, and Duque strode in. Before the door closed, Duque's words floated out. "I'm going to rest. Don't disturb me before Kil'jaeden's adjutant arrives." The door seemed to be closing slowly, but it was actually closing very quickly. Grom, who seemed to be in a daze, was left behind in the middle of the hall. But in fact, his heart was already in turmoil. Wait until we get back to Azeroth. Is there someone watching here? But doesn't that mean Duque is fine? He's fine. I've already fallen into madness after being stained with that little bit of demonic blood. He absorbed so much dark energy, and he's still able to maintain his sense of self. Grom stood with his right hand on his left chest, listening to his heartbeat and savoring the bitterness in his mouth. Suddenly, he raised his head 45 degrees and stared at the distorted void outside the porthole. His throat gurgled. It's so hard to not be able to repay a debt of gratitude. Grom was no longer young. Although in the eyes of his compatriots, he was a great hero whose name was engraved on Orgrimmar's newly erected hero monument, a living legend. Only he himself felt that he, who had wrongly encouraged everyone to drink the demonic blood, did not deserve the title of great hero. Thinking back to the time when he fought against Mannoroth, he survived thanks to Duque's help. After that day, he had a very mysterious feeling. Not only did he escape a curse that was destined to lead to tragedy, but he also seemed to have broken the noose of fate. It was a vague feeling of fate. But his intuition, which had never been wrong in his life, told him that it was correct. Chapter 1005. He had thought countless times about helping Dooku and repaying the debt he owed to a human. Then he, who did not owe the other party anything, could die peacefully on the battlefield. Who knew that he would be saved by Duque time and time again. Now he had no choice but to shamelessly act like a coward in front of the evil demons and endure the humiliation. It was to return to 10,000 years in the future and report to Sar. Perhaps this humiliation was completely meaningless, because once the evil demons found out, he would definitely die a horrible death. Now Duque was so powerful. He had not fallen, but he had tricked so many evil demons. He had even tricked the cunning Burning Legion's commander, Kil'jaeden. He could return to Azeroth soon. What a hopeful ending this was. Even though he was in the enemy camp, he could not help me at all. Yet he still chose to help me, gave me hope, and gave me the responsibility to lead my people back. Duque, you are too generous. How do you expect me to repay you? As expected. Only a great hero like you can truly lead Azeroth to the future? For some reason, even though Grom wanted to cry, he laughed. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. He laughed loudly, impudently, and bleakly. He had the boldness of a beast man. He also had the rich emotions that humans should have. Just like that, Grom could not sleep for the entire night. The next morning, the Eridar Gemini came. On the surface, the explanation was that the army wanted to snatch the Well of Eternity from the uncivilized low-class races. But what was in Azeroth and its connection to the Pantheon was not mentioned. As the saying went, everything that should be said was said without missing a word. and everything that should not be said was left unsaid. Even though he flattered Duque by saying that opening the teleportation portal would be considered a great contribution to the army, he knew that he was just a pawn to explore the path. It would be good if he succeeded. If not, he would just lose a non-Eridar lord. The Burning Legion had a 4-digit number of lords. Duque wouldn't make a difference whether he was there or not. An hour later, in the middle of the ancient Kalimdor continent on planet Azeroth, a glorious city was displaying its boundless charm in the night sky. Even the wind and rain could not conceal the magnificent radiance of this city. Azhara was a great city that was closest to the Well of Eternity in ancient times. The Night Elves used the power of the Eternal Well to build the Queen's capital city. Unlike Surlama, the High Elves living in Azhara did not worship the moon goddess Elun. Instead, they blindly worshipped the power of arcane magic. Because of this, they slowly alienated themselves from nature. Cenarius and the other demigods and druids were not welcomed here. The High Elves wanted magnificent city buildings and arcane magic. They believed that the power of magic could rule over everything. In Galhala, a great city some distance away from Azhara. Although it did not have the tall and majestic Forbidden Palace of Azhara, it did not have the magical combination of stone and wood. But what Galhala possessed was enough to make all the elven druids in Surlama unable to sleep. On this stormy night, there was a mysterious air around it. Those who knew what it represented did not even dare to stare at the palace-like mage tower in the center of the city. People all shifted their gazes to avoid attracting the attention of the guards. Around the mage tower, the guards wore green armor and carried spears and swords as they carefully looked around. Not only did they monitor the outside of the city for trespassers, but they also paid special attention to the movements inside from time to time, especially the main tower. They seemed to have sensed that an unpredictable, mysterious power was being nurtured. Not enough, not enough. Not enough at all. You bunch of idiots. When are you going to let that great existence descend? Savi's was a powerful arcanist and a fanatic who was most obsessed with arcane magic and various mysterious powers. 10,000 years later, the forbidden experiments that the Night Elves, High Elves and humans had strictly forbidden were not a problem at this point in time. As a noble High Elf noble and the Queen's chief advisor, all of his experiments were approved by the Queen. Under his leadership, the Wizards of Galhala began a ritual that was performed every night. In order to complete the ritual, they had to constantly rearrange the magic jades and arcane crystals to demarcate the boundaries of magic power, so that the magic power could better play the role of the summoning circle. Suddenly, there was movement between the crystals. Like a protective circle that was suddenly attacked, a few shields of light suddenly rose above the crystals. Unfortunately, the light disappeared in a flash. The crystals that were once filled with powerful magic power dimmed in large pieces. Although the Wizards of Galhala were not as proficient in magic as the Moon Guards, they knew very well that what was happening now should not have happened. They immediately began to check the arrangement again and again, but still could not understand what was wrong. They don't seem to be absorbing magic power from the Well of Eternity, a young Cursemancer said. A young Cursemancer asserted. Something is trying to cut off the energy flow from the front. Trash. Trash. All trash. Savi's could no longer control his anger, and lashed out at the young Cursemancer's face. Even though the Cursemancer had more than 10 methods to avoid or resist this whip, he still lowered his head and forcibly endured this whip, leaving behind a deep red mark on his rather delicate and pretty face. Suddenly, Savi's quivered. His expression became absent-minded. Yes. He heard a voice. Although it was a little vague, he heard all the keywords clearly. My servant. I will send out a lord to assist you. A powerful lord, huh? That's great. I've been worrying about not being able to show Her Majesty the Queen the great power of the Burning Legion. Is there anything you need me to do? Let go of your soul. Enter a deep sleep. All right. Yes, great Lord Kil'jaeden. Under the strange gazes of all the Magi, Savi's actually fell asleep standing. He lowered his head and looked like he was on the verge of collapsing, as if he would fall to the ground in the next second. However, Savi's moved. His slender fingers fluttered incessantly, and his intense movements formed a stark contrast with his blank expression. Lord. Amagus cautiously approached Savis. They could not imagine what had happened to Savis. Chapter 1006. One by one, crystals brimming with mysterious magic were thrown out by Savis's dexterous hands, and they landed lightly on the ground. It looked no different from the magic circle that had failed before, but the order in which the crystals were laid out had clearly caused a special reaction that was different from the past. The magic circle lit up. A green brilliance that had never been seen before began to fill the entire magic circle, and powerful magic meandered around. Brighter, brighter, brighter. The next moment, a huge black shadow that was more than 10 meters tall suddenly cut through the void and descended from the sky. With an ear-piercing roar of thunder and lightning, it appeared majestically in the middle of the magic circle. Savis and the night elf sorcerers who had just woken up from their trance were stunned. They had completely lost their ability to speak as they stared at the huge figure, oblivious to everything else. It had huge bat wings like a giant dragon, sharp claws, and a body that was many times more muscular than a troll. From the head that was sunk deep in the shadow, 2 scarlet eyes with a gaze like lightning, fierce and lifelike. It was like the most arrogant emperor, looking down at these night elf arcanists as if they were ants. It smiled. In its open mouth, there were thousands of sharp fangs of various sizes, emitting the most primitive terror. What was even more terrifying was its aura. It was majestic like a collapsing mountain, like a falling star. It was as if just by standing there, it could squeeze the air out of the lungs of the night elves bit by bit, and they could no longer inhale the slightest bit of oxygen. It was a terror that was close to suffocating, but Savis felt that his heart was not because of a lack of oxygen, but because of ecstasy. That's right. Powerful. Only this kind of power was worthy of being the messenger of the supreme existence in his heart. A lord of the Burning Legion. At that moment, Savis's eyes were filled with tears of excitement. The intense magical wave finally subsided. What appeared in front of them was indeed a gigantic and terrifying pure black giant. Beside him was a rather tall and burly green silhouette. Unfortunately, the giant was too huge, and the elf subconsciously ignored the green figure beside him. Was it a dark energy lord? Or a dreadlord? There was an irrepressible excitement in Sarva's heart. However, in front of all the elves, the huge black figure seemed to have exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, and shrunk rapidly, turning into a humanoid creature that was slightly shorter than the night elves. Moreover, his aura was quickly fading away. Human. Savis couldn't hide his astonishment. In his impression, creatures with this appearance were called humans. They were a group of barbarians who basically did not wear any clothes or used a piece of dirty animal skin to cover their lower bodies. This human did not look powerful, nor did he have any outstanding appearance. Perhaps he was tall among humans, but compared to the taller night elves, his appearance wasn't an advantage. Instead, the 2.5-meter tall green giant behind this human stood out. A magus who looked rather experienced suddenly sneered. Lord Savis, is this the Lord that you summoned from the distant, distorted void without hesitation at the expense of a huge amount of magic crystals? Anyone could hear the sarcasm in the old warlock's words. But before Savis could speak, the young-looking human gently snapped his fingers. For some reason, even though the night elves' ears did not hear any sound, there was a huge tremor that went straight into the hearts of all the elves from the old warlock's head. Bam! If one had to give an onomatopoeic word, that would be it. This was not any type of physical attack, and it had nothing to do with arcane spells. It was a pure spiritual attribute. It easily shook this old warlock, who was considered one of the top-ranked warlocks in the Azhara dynasty, to the point that he was dizzy on the spiritual level. The old warlock was horrified and tried to retreat. Just then, the green monster suddenly raised a huge one-handed axe high, and a scarlet light flashed. The double magical shield that wrapped around the old warlock was as fragile as an eggshell, and was easily broken. In the next moment, 2 long legs dressed in luxurious fabrics were sent flying. But the old warlock's remaining body completely defied the laws of physics, and even after receiving the horizontal impact, Everything above the knee was still stuck straight into the ground. No, the bones that were already exposed were actually forcefully inserted into the obsidian ground. The old warlock did not faint, but every curve on his face was condensed with fear, and every inch of his eyes was filled with despair. That scene was truly evil. A wave of fear that came from the deepest depths of their souls froze the bodies of every night elf present, including Savi's. Only then did the Lord speak slowly, and he was surprisingly fluent in Kadoriai. There have been countless beings who have tried to look down on me with their height, but every time I've closed the gap between us, no one would dare to look at me like that anymore. Remember, Savi's, if anyone dares to do this again, I'll cut off everything above the neck. As soon as he said that, all the elves in the surroundings felt a sudden impact on their spirit seas. That was, planets destroyed one after another. Millions upon millions of slaughtered creatures. At the same time, they let out howls of despair. No elf could withstand such a terrifying spiritual impact. In an instant, there was no one left standing in the summoning hall other than the Lord and the burly green figure. After a while, Savi's, covered in sweat as if he had been fished out of the water, actually scrambled over and prostrated himself in front of the powerful Lord of the Burning Legion. 100,000 apologies. These lowly mortals actually dared to offend the dignity of the Legion. As long as you give the order, I'll definitely sacrifice the lives and souls of these offenders to the Legion. Savi's abandoned all restraint and dignity, and kept kowtowing with great humility. Humph. The Lord waved his hand lightly, and the once powerful old warlock suddenly turned into a large human-shaped torch, bathed in demonic green flames. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to scream, and even the surrounding elves could hear the tragic cries coming from his soul. But in that mouth, in his throat, in his vocal cords, not a single tremor could be produced. Just like that, he turned into ashes in a mere few seconds. The Lord spoke, "My name is Infernal Affairs. But a name is just a code. You can also call me Mark Dooku." Chapter 1007. Who was Savi's? A Breaking Dawn powerhouse. The second most powerful person in the Kador Empire. The first favorite of Queen Azhara, the famous king of nightmares in later generations. It could be said that he was the biggest spy in the ancient war, and also one of the most important figures in the core. However, such a powerful figure was currently lying on the ground, shivering. He didn't even dare to raise his head to look at Duque. If Duque could return to the modern era immediately, he would be able to brag about this for the rest of his life. Grom, who was behind Duque, was also dumbfounded. He was really a little confused. Seeing this, even the brave and loyal Grom couldn't help but have doubts again. Has Duque fallen? Is he using his memories from before he fell to control me? Or is he not fallen and is still acting? Grom's anxiety to know the truth was almost burning his heart. Unfortunately, he couldn't do anything. He could only use his identity as Duque's lackey to continue threatening the Night Elves with his sinister mouth. Duque continued to play his role as the greater demon lord. Right in front of Savi's, he said coldly, "Raise your head and look at me." Yes. Savi's trembled as he raised his head. You too. Yes. Under the gaze of Savi's and the group of elven magi, Duque seemed to be moving in slow motion, turning his skin into an illusory black that was as dark as ink inch by inch. This shadow form, which was very common in the future, was something that had never been heard of before. In his black form, Duque's gaze was as sharp as a sword, fiercely cutting into Savi's face and heart. "I am the greater demon lord of the Burning Legion, Infernal Affairs. What I know is only death and destruction. So don't try to challenge my authority in any way. Otherwise, be prepared for at least one city to be destroyed. Understood?" Understood. Savi's was so scared that he almost wet his pants, and hurriedly agreed. "Give me a moon well that hasn't been dirted. I want to take a bath." Yes. 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 Savi's hurriedly nodded. Without even looking at Sarvis, Duque deactivated shadow form, and strode away. Grom followed behind Duque with Blood Roar on his shoulder. At this moment, Savi's eagerly followed, nodding and bowing. "Great Seamless. Call me by my temporary name, Mark." Duque corrected. Sir Mark, I am carrying out this summoning ritual in the name of Queen Azhara. Do you have time to meet the queen? Duque stopped, releasing an astonishing aura of power without anger. His gaze was so fierce that Savi's actually had a terrifying, dazed feeling that Duque's eyes were blooming with the light of death, easily breaking his body into two. Are you ordering me? No. I dare not. Savi's once again knelt on the ground with incomparable humility. This is just a suggestion, a small suggestion. Duque was secretly pleased, but unfortunately, he could not show it on his face. He still looked domineering as he snorted coldly. I'm not in the mood for now. But seeing that you're still relatively obedient, I'll give this to you. With that, Duque threw out a few tubes that looked like test tubes flowing with green fluorescence. Savi's hurriedly caught them. This is... Give it to your enemy to drink. Just one drop, and you'll get the powerful warrior you want. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Savi simply could not contain the ecstasy in his heart. He actually shamelessly crawled over and kissed Duque's right shoe. When he kissed for the third time, a look of disgust appeared on Duque's face. He withdrew his foot like lightning and kicked Savi's in the face, leaving a pitch-black shoe print on this night elf noble's face. Scram. Lead the way. Yes, yes, yes. Savi's, the man who had brought great disasters to Azeroth many times in history, was now serving Duque like the most loyal servant. Grom, who was behind Duque, was dumbfounded and did not know what to say. At this point in time, the Kaldorii Empire had overused the water from the Well of Eternity. The Well of Eternity had long since turned into ink, and even rats were unwilling to drink the water. Fortunately, before the Well of Eternity had been polluted, there were still many moon wells that had cut off their connection to the Well of Eternity and maintained their purity. This was the case in a royal villa located 30 kilometers west of Galhalla. Savi's worshipped Duque and Grom as if they were gods, and let a large group of royal guards lead the way. Guarding beside Duque were the famous moon guards of the Kaldorii Empire, who cultivated both magic and martial arts. After leading Duque and Grom into this magnificent royal villa filled with arcane decorations and appliances, Savi's tactfully left behind 12 beautiful, but short elven maidservants and left respectfully. My lord, please rest first. I will visit you again tomorrow at noon. Duque waved his hand impatiently as he dismissed Savi's like a fly. His gaze then fell on the maidservants who were forcing a smile but were actually trembling. Perhaps Duque had asked Grom to shorten the height of the old elf wizard's legs, but it had left a deep impression on Savi's. Savi's had actually managed to find 12 elven maidservants who were slightly shorter than Duque. This was a very rare thing. One should know that the night elves had evolved from trolls, and the average height of the ancient night elves was more than 9 meters. The poor Duque had grown taller after adulthood, and after absorbing dark energy for a second growth spurt, he was only 85 meters. This was not bad for a human's height, but for the night elves, he was still half a head shorter. Duque almost wanted to say, I'm in despair too. The 12 night elf maidservants, if not for their purplish skin color and the annoying facial wrinkles on Duque's face, would have been a good eye candy. The problem was that Duque had a belly full of secrets, and Grom's patience was almost at its limit. He could only say, You may leave. I don't need your service. But the maidservant who seemed to be the head of the maidservants said bitterly. Duque threatened. Do you see my servant's fangs? He's an out-and-out ferocious race. Once he goes berserk and eats you up, don't blame me for not warning you. The pitiful elf girl retreated in a panic, leaving the dumbfounded Grom behind. Grom almost wanted to curse. Damn it, when did I eat someone? Ignoring Grom, Duque quickly set up a magic circle, and then soaked in the moon well like he was in a hot spring. The mysterious and strange prayer immediately echoed above the moon well. Light comes from darkness, and from darkness comes light. Chapter 1008. As someone who had witnessed a miracle with his own eyes, Grom knew that Duque had the ability to resist the darkness. This was also the biggest psychological support that kept him going. Even though he had seen it once, When Grom saw it again, he could not suppress the excitement in his heart. His large heart was beating wildly in his wide chest. On the arm that was tightly holding onto Blood Roar, the veins were bulging like earthworms. Gritting his teeth and holding his breath, Grom did not dare to miss a single detail of Duque. He was afraid that Duque's conversion to darkness would fail, and he would truly degenerate into a terrifying leader of the Burning Legion. On Duque's chest, a golden flame suddenly appeared. Like the first spark on a dry grassland, the golden flames quickly engulfed Duke's entire body like a prairie fire. Grom could see with his naked eyes that the dark power of darkness was being burned and purified. The darkness on Duque's body retreated like a defeated army, until it reached the area above Duque's neck. On his neck, the dark power, which had already turned dark, did not retreat, clashing fiercely with the power of light. Two powerful forces that mortals could only look up to, with the arteries and veins on Duque's neck as the battlefield, began an unimaginable slaughter. At that moment, Grom suddenly noticed that the water level in the well was dropping rapidly. The water level in the moon well the size of a baseball field was dropping at a rate of 1 centimeter per second. It was as if a whirlpool had appeared on Duque's body, and with an imposing manner, he sucked in the pure and flawless well water through his pores. 3 seconds later, Duque suddenly vomited. Blarg! Not only did he vomit, but thick black ink was also gushing out of Duque's nostrils, ears, and even his tear ducts. Ugh! It was a very strange scene. The well water that was sucked into Duque's side was pure white, and the side that he vomited on was absolutely black. The well water swirled clockwise, creating a mystical pattern similar to the Taoist yin-yang fish, Taiji diagram. Grom, who was watching from the side, felt a sense of awe and anticipation rose in his heart. As a former victim of the devil's blood, Grom was very clear on how chaotic that berserk power was. It was impossible for it to have this kind of behavior that was clearly on the side of order. Could it be that Duque, this monstrous human super genius, could even conquer the terrifying dark power of the Burning Legion? As Grom's thoughts ran wild, Duque's path of being a fraud continued. Light comes from darkness, and from darkness comes light. The tune was even more divine than the brainwashing divine tune. After more than 10 minutes, the black sesame paste that Duque spat out finally became a sesame paste demon. And Duque became a sanctimonious priest wearing the skin of a holy golden priest. Looking at Duque walking down the stairs beside the moon well like the most devout believer, Grom had a strange expression on his face. He touched his coarse beard and asked, "Duque, you finally converted the darkness in your body?" Duque smiled bitterly. "You could say that, but you've been through it. You know that even if most of it is gone, there will always be some left." Grom's respect for Duque grew. 2 times. The first time was when he dealt with Archaron. The second time was when he fought the dark power alone. Each time, Duque had chosen to sacrifice himself when he had a choice. Grom used to be tortured by the demon blood in his dreams, and he often woke up from his sleep because he could not suppress the violence in his heart. He was very clear about the side effects of the demon's power, so he did not dare to let any of his compatriots get close to him while he was sleeping for so many years, because he was afraid that he would tear his compatriots apart while he was unconscious. Feeling Grom's sympathetic gaze, Duque could only smile bitterly. If Grom's characteristic was anger, then Duque had all 7 sins. But due to his easygoing nature, most of the 7 sins had nothing to do with Duque, except cough. Duque waved his hand at Grom. "I'm fine. Compared to the survival of the world and the continuation of history, my business is trivial." Then Duke told Grom a bunch of bullsh*t that even he didn't believe. "Remember, we are here on behalf of the Dragon of Time, Nozdormu, to preserve the original appearance of history." Am I sure I'm not here to destroy history? In our time, the High Elves were a race that had been destroyed. The capital of the Kaldorii Empire was also blown up. Even if our ultimate goal is to save planet Azeroth, it does not mean that we are going to stop the Burning Legion. Nonsense. If we really did stop it, how could I steal equipment from Kil'jaeden? So, what we need to do is to go with the original development of history. It's fine if you don't know Azeroth's history, just listen to me. Good boy. Don't mess around. Don't be rash. I'll take you to steal equipment later. Grom's eyes reddened at Duque's words. The orc hero nodded heavily. Yes. I'll listen to you. Good. The dupe succeeded. Early the next morning, Duque had already sensed that Savis had been waiting outside. He paced back and forth anxiously, looking excited and nervous. The test tubes that Duque had given him had probably succeeded. Duque just had to leave him hanging. Every time Savis couldn't restrain himself and sent the pale elven girls to ask in whispers, "Has Lord Infernal Affairs woken up yet?" He would send the fiendish Grom to stop them without any makeup. No. Don't talk nonsense, I'll eat you if you keep talking. This caused every single elf girl to go back in tears. At noon, Duke, who was putting on airs, finally called in a few pale elf ladies to help him change his clothes. Then, after he finished eating the various delicacies specially prepared by the high elf chef, he called Savis in for a chat, as though he was calling a fortune. Great. Great Lord Mark Dooku. Savis was still humble and submissive, prostrating himself on all fours. He didn't skimp on anything. Duque was happy to see this bastard who had betrayed his empire, his master, and the planet. Duque raised his eyelids slightly. What is it? My lord. The medicine you gave me is indeed miraculous. After seeing the results, my emperor was very happy. However, this is only for the enemy. Is there anything that can increase our strength? That. Savis also knew that Queen Azhara's request was a little too much, but he did not dare to disobey the request of the woman he deeply admired. Chapter 1009. Duque let out a mocking laugh, looking as if he had expected this from him. He then pointed his finger into the distance. That pool over there is a strength potion specially made for you lot. Grom, the lousy actor, almost lost his act when he heard that. Bloody hell, this is clearly your vomit from last night, and you have the cheek to say that it's a good stuff specially made for the night elves? No, no, no. This can't be the Duque I know. Could I have been fooled by his holy light? Why does it feel like the Righteous Alliance hero Duke Marcus, who would always act righteously, whether it was tricking his enemies or saving his own in times of danger, had changed so much? Is this really the influence of dark energy? Speaking of which, even the wild boars in the barren lands, which are said to have no fear of meat or fish, would not eat the disgusting black stuff in this pool. Would the night elves want this? Grom's grimace gave Duque a headache. He thought to himself, Grom, have you misunderstood something? I've always been faithful, and I've always been this unscrupulous. What you saw before, what you believed, was just an illusion of an old man like you. Grom had already mentally prepared himself that Savis would fly into a rage when he saw the pool and flip the table. When that happened, he would have to teach this fellow a lesson. Grom knew very well that as a powerful Breaking Dawn arcanist, Savis did not have many chances to fight. It was very likely that there would only be one chance. Just as Lord Roar was ready to fight, something happened that made Lord Roar break down. Ah, this power. It's wonderful. Savis was like a starving wild dog that saw a steaming pile of shit when his stomach was rumbling. He almost pounced on it. Ignoring the rain, Savis leaned against the side of the pool, his palms pressed against the decorative porcelain, looking like he wanted to take off his clothes and jump in. How could Grom, who was ready to beat someone up, look at this? Master Ho's face was about to crumble. Duque's whisper of the wind reached Grom's ears unhurriedly. You don't understand the so-called high elves' obsession with power. For the sake of magic, they've already turned the well of eternity blacker than coal. Therefore this color and this degree of evil are nothing. Ah, is that even possible? Grom's eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. If Savis was the only one acting like this, then it could be said that Savis and Duque were putting on a show together. However, the two elven arcanists who came with Savis also stretched their necks, looking as if they couldn't wait to rush over and see what was going on. They were very excited by that pool of black sesame paste. All right. You city people, O'Farah, really know how to have fun. Anyway, we who play with axes don't understand. Grom was finally convinced. Duque wasn't bluffing. At that moment, in Azhara City hundreds of kilometers away, The storm had caused the dark lake water in the Well of Eternity to become turbulent, as if it was surging. In the distance, it set off a huge wave that almost covered the Azhara Palace. The black waves roared and slapped each other in the air, bursting with arcane energy. In the sky, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled as if 1,000 violent dragons were charging from the shore. As someone who had just teleported from the palace and witnessed the violence of the Well of Eternity and the calm of the pool of evil energy, Savi still cheered. This energy is so stable. Yes, this was Duque's vomit, and the best part had been converted by Duque. But no matter how many impurities there were, it was still the purest dark energy in the twisted nether. The concentration of magic was not at the same level as the Well of Eternity, but unlike the high-purity magic well water in the Well of Eternity that could not be used directly, Duque's inferior dark energy could be easily absorbed by living beings. It was because he could see this at a glance, and with Duque using the Burning Legion's name to swindle people, that Pharaoh, who was of a high level like Savi's, did not doubt him at all. Duque was cold and arrogant, and his "I'm your boss" aura instantly dominated the scene. Purification is such a simple thing, and you want me, the Grand Lord of the Burning Legion, to do it? Not to mention these pollutants. Even if Duque pooped a pile of sh*t, Savi's would probably eat it. He had that pride. You little night elves want to ride on my coattails, right? Now that the coattails are here, kneel and lick them. You want power, right? I gave it to you, but what about your sincerity? Duque did not say a word, but his eyes and his aura said so. Duque's eyes were filled with undisguised murderous intent. Savi's, know your place. If you don't satisfy me, don't blame me for starting a massacre. Savi shuddered. The carrot and the stick always arrived at the same time. Since the Grand Lord of the Burning Legion had fulfilled his promise, it was obviously time to pay the bill. Savi's, this bastard who cheated his dream lover, his country, and his compatriots, decisively sold himself and his resources. Lord Mark Dooku, my direct subordinates and I are willing to offer our souls to the army. I will also bring Her Majesty Queen Azhara here to pay her respects to you within today. Savi's words were resolute and sonorous. Selling souls and lives just like that. Grom, who was watching from the side, felt his teeth ache when he saw this heroic and righteous act. At this moment, Grom finally had the most direct and deep understanding of how crazy the ancient night elf mages were when it came to pursuing power. Duque did not even lift his eyelids. He snorted in disdain and pointed at the black sesame paste on the floor in front of him. Even in the eyes of the beastmen who did not like cleanliness, that place was filthy and smelly. Savi's, on the other hand, was like a dog chasing a bone. He crawled over respectfully and prostrated on the black mud and rainwater, his forehead touching the ground. My lord, please grant me power. It was not just him. Even the radiant moon elven wizard, who came with him, knelt on the ground. Duque's lips parted slightly. Dark energy is powerful. Dark energy is also great. It is the noble power that the great commander, Sargeras, bestowed upon the chosen races that transcend the mortal world. Weak trash has no right to receive dark energy. As Duque's voice grew louder and louder, like thunder, an IMAX screen appeared behind Duque. It was a huge illusory screen that was 15 meters tall. Look up. Look at the fate of those inferior races. The faces of the 3 elves who looked up were twitching. This was because in the image, over 20 creatures of different races had exploded and died. But the one who succeeded in the end showed an incomparably powerful increase in power. Duque was majestic and domineering. Savi's, let me ask you, are you willing to accept the baptism of dark energy under the flag of the Legion? Chapter 10:10. Kiss. You want to drink my foot wash water. Oh no, you want to believe in religion? If you don't believe in religion and don't want to die, then it will be very difficult for me to deal with you. This was Duque's subtext. On the side, when he saw Duke using threats and promises to coax a powerful diehard fan of the Burning Legion, the righteous hero Grom Hellscream, he silently said in his heart, Duke, you can do whatever you want, I can't bear to watch any longer. Call me if you're going to make a move. Raising his head slightly, Lord Hell looked at the gloomy and rainy sky. Ah, The weather is so good today. I don't even have a place to count the ants. On the other side, Savis, who was immersed in the temptation of power, didn't notice the trap in Duque's words. That's right. It's true that I let you join the Legion, but I didn't say whether the Legion was the Burning Legion or the Green Hat Pirates. Anyway, I am now the leader of the Burning Legion. If you are not convinced, you can go to President Savis and sue me. If you can see through my true identity and prove that this young master harbors ill intentions. As a result, of course, Savis believed in Duque's evil. It was like saying that classic sentence to the other half in a cathedral full of yin-yang fishes and blessings of Ami-tofu. Savis said with sincerity and fanaticism, I am willing. Grom, who was next to him, suddenly felt very lucky that he didn't drink too much water at lunch. Otherwise he would have laughed out loud on the spot. He really didn't understand why Savis chose to believe in Duque's evil even though he knew that it was extremely risky, and that he could easily lose his life. Grom wanted to ask more questions than the sky. In the words of a transmigrator, he wanted to ask Savis, are you stupid? In fact, Grom couldn't be blamed. As a beastman, he could never understand the desire of the High Elves for power. At the same time, it was impossible for him to know how many modern scams Duque, a super transmigrator who had transmigrated twice, had seen in the Celestial Empire on Earth. This was actually a psychological bait. First of all, it was to grasp the psychological needs of the target. You want power, right? I do. Then he would repeatedly use psychological hints to hint to Savis, such as, your chances of winning the 20 million lottery are definitely higher than your chances of earning 20 million with your own hands. After becoming a Breaking Dawn and being unable to advance even an inch, Savis, who had been anxious for who knew how many centuries, was naturally more impatient and prone to losing his rationality. What followed next was the results of the series of digging holes. Publicly, Duque had the endorsement of Kill Jaden, the big boss of the Burning Legion. With his 4 identities as the Neighborhood Committee, the Jarmite Police Department, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Homeland Security Bureau, he had helped Duque prove that his grandfather was his grandfather. From the very beginning, he had beaten Sarvis into submission. Generally speaking, if any Burning Legion liege were to forcefully descend upon Azeroth, their combat power would be reduced by 80 to 90% by planet Azeroth's protection circle. However, Duque was an authentic Azeroth man. When Nozdormu threw Duque back to 10,000 years ago, how could he not know about the backdoor he had left behind? So, Duque had brought back almost all the power he had obtained from the Twisting Nether. Duke, in his strongest Shadow Priest form that no one had ever seen in 10,000 years, had descended after being filled with dark energy. As soon as he descended, he beat up almost all the mortal powerhouses, completely shocking Savis and the other clowns. In the end, even if Sarvis was as cunning as a ghost, he had no choice but to jump into the fire pit. Duque did not even lift his eyelids as he said in a deep voice, "Offer your soul to the Legion." Duque drew a line with his finger, and an illusory soul scale appeared in front of Sarvis. It was a scale in the style of the Burning Legion. The base was an imitation of the old Kill, Jaden's demonic hand, and then the 2 ends of the scale. One end was naturally left for Sarvis, and the other end was a glassware, which contained a ball of flickering yellow-green light of dark energy. Anyone could tell at a glance that this ball of dark energy was pure and powerful. It was hundreds of times better than the pool of mushy seeds in front of them. This was a special offering. Sarvis suddenly came to a realization. The more souls he offered, the more loyal it represented, and the more power he could obtain. It was very fair. There was nothing wrong with it. At first, he had only intended to offer 20% as a token of goodwill. But as things progressed, he felt that it would be embarrassing to offer less than 30%. Now it seemed that less than 40% was not appropriate at all. Of course, 50% was impossible. Anyone who cut off 50% of their soul would no longer be themselves, but just a walking corpse with a broken soul. So no matter how reluctant and bitter he was, Sarvis gritted his teeth and sent a thought to the empty end of the scale that he was willing to offer 40% of his soul. Sarvis. In order to prove my loyalty to the Burning Legion, I am willing to offer 40% of my soul to the Legion's emissary, Lord Infernal Emissary. After saying that, Sarvis seemed to have lost all his strength. Well said. With a smile on his face, Duque suddenly appeared out of thin air. With a demon's head as the blade, a soul dagger gleaming with dark energy suddenly appeared and slowly cut down towards Sarvis. Aha! After Sarvis let out a scream, his body twitched, and a few seconds later, he slumped to the ground as if dead. When did Duque learn to cut souls? Please, this was a necessary self-cultivation for the Burning Legion's leader, okay? If he wanted to mingle in the Burning Legion, he had to learn how to capture other people's souls. And he still had the cheek to call himself a leader? Before Duque left, he had made a lot of promises to exchange for this essential leader skill from the Eridar Gemini. Of course, after the analysis of the system genie, Duque had secretly cancelled the trick left behind by the Gemini. Cutting souls was a technical job. Forcibly taking out the other party's soul from the body was very difficult, and the prerequisite was that your soul's strength far surpassed the other party's. And it was strenuous and unrewarding, because forcibly cutting the other party's soul would also consume one's own soul power. But it was different if the other party offered it willingly. It was even easier than using a knife to cut butter. As long as this soul was in Duque's hands, in the future, as long as Duque squeezed it, Sarvis's soul would not collapse, and his soul would be destroyed, but his strength would be greatly reduced, and he would become useless. Since Sarvis had jumped into the pit, Duque naturally accepted it with a smile. Using the newly learned method, after solidifying Sarvis's soul, he sealed it in a special soul container and put it away. Duque smiled. On behalf of Lord Sargeras, I bestow upon you Sarvis's power. A green light of evil energy flicked out of his fingertip and flew to Sarvis's head, forming a green hat, or crown, which was placed firmly on Sarvis's head. Chapter 10-11. Sarvis could clearly feel that the shackles that had bound him for countless years were beginning to be unlocked under the push of this brand new power. All over his body, the 100,000 pores were seeped into by this powerful and surging power. It brutally rushed into his body, entered his magic circuit, and with an unparalleled will, occupied every corner of his body. It was like a conqueror, branding every organ and every cell with dark powers. From the dimmest 6th grade star, it began to soar. 5th grade star, 4th grade star, 3rd grade star. The breaking dawn magic power that had not increased for many years had actually increased by 3 grades in one go. Sarvis could not help but tremble with excitement. Haha! Power! Is this the taste of power? Sarvis straightened up and looked at his slender fingers that seemed to have grown sharp claws, but he did not care. Instead, his face was full of ecstasy and excitement. However, all of a sudden, the power that seemed to be expanding endlessly in his body came to an abrupt stop. This made Sarvis suddenly fall from the clouds of happiness to the ground. He looked at Duque with a face full of surprise. He did not know what was going on. Although it was good, why was it different from what he had imagined? There was a strange and mysterious smile in Duque's smile. The army never raises trash. To measure the value of an existence, one is to look at his loyalty, and the other is to look at his actions. Go. Push for the opening of the portal to welcome the army into Azeroth. The day the portal opens will be the day you get the power you dream of. Sarvis suddenly came to a realization. That's right. Loyalty was important. But ability was also the key. Those who had loyalty but no ability were useless trash. Not to mention the army, even he did not like those incompetent subordinates. There was nothing wrong with the scheming of an emperor. He still remembered that when he was communicating with the void, Sarvis in the spiritual world stood in front of a blazing sphere, looking at the crack in the middle with full attention. In the depths of the sphere, the eyes of God were also looking at him. I heard your pleas. And knowing your dream, the impurities and imperfections in the world should be eliminated. I will give you what you desire. You are my loyal servant. The entrance is not open yet. It needs to be strengthened, because it needs to be big enough for me to enter. Those were the exact words of God. Sarvis nodded to Duque, indicating that he understood the request of God, conveyed by Duque. The teleportation door made by the night elves using normal methods could not accommodate a god. As long as he squeezed in, the door would probably shatter into pieces. They had to enlarge and widen the door so that it could stay open forever. This was God's ultimate test for him. The Great Lord Mark Dooku. My following request is not necessary, but if what? If there is more evidence, it will speed up the process of pushing Her Majesty Queen Azhara towards the army. After pondering for 2 seconds, Savi's finally said, I hope the army can send some powerful servants to serve the Empress. If possible, try to look as beautiful as possible. Duque smiled. The great god will always satisfy the reasonable requests of his servants. In the afternoon, the forbidden palace of Azhara was silent. As the child of the stars, Kador usually slept during the day to avoid being hurt by the rough and hot sunlight. So the Empress was sleeping. As the Empress, Azhara had the right to rest as much as she wanted. In short, she had to be perfect in all aspects, especially when it came to her beauty. Therefore, Azhara did not have a good impression of the servant who came in quietly. The servant quickly knelt on both knees in the Empress' room. The young Empress got off the bed and was faintly visible behind the thin curtains. Your Majesty, please forgive me, but the chief advisor wants to tell you something. He said he brought something that you are interested in. Azhara could not think of anything that could interest her and make her leave her comfortable bed immediately, even if the one who made this request was her most trusted Savis. Her long silver hair was draped over the pillow. She pursed her lips but still waved. Let him wait for 5 minutes. The Empress looked angry, but she had already stood up gracefully. Looking at herself in the mirror, still charming, Azhara smiled. Perhaps her cute chief advisor thought he had already controlled his master. But as the most beautiful Empress, she had the absolute confidence that she could control any man. Let him come in 10 minutes. She stretched her body gracefully and reclined on a chaise longue, one arm behind her head. 2 servants in silk clothes knelt beside her and gently fanned themselves. Seeing Savis enter quickly, Azhara slightly adjusted her posture, so that the contours of her most seductive body could match the light and be displayed in the most perfect way. The Empress would always speak in the most melodious and moving voice. My dear Savis, since you want to see me at this time, you must have something very important to tell me. The Empress' hand seemed intentional, but also seemed unintentional. It gently slid over her smooth thighs, making the curves of her body even more exquisite and curvaceous. Please forgive me for taking some time, so that I can adjust to my best state to see you. Looking at Savis, whose throat made a swallowing motion, the Empress' smile became even more charming. Savi's heart tightened. He went forward and knelt on one knee. Staring at the white marble floor, he replied, Source of all light, the most beautiful existence in the world. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to see you. I am very bold to disturb you, but I have brought you a very interesting gift. This gift is truly worthy of you. The Queen of the Night Elves, the ruler of the world. Can I summon them up? He glanced at her and found that these words had definitely attracted the Empress' attention. The Empress' eyes showed increasing curiosity and desire through the veil. Azhara was no longer in a lazy posture. Instead, she sat up and leaned against the back of the chaise longue. Her limbs were slightly tense because of nervousness. You have whetted my appetite, my dear Savis. I permit you to present the gift. The counselor stood up, turned around, and snapped his fingers toward the door. There was never a lack of guards when it came to presenting gifts. Surrounded by guards, Queen Azhara's breathing suddenly quickened, and then her face flushed with excitement. There were 4 incomparably tall demon guards and 12 elf maids wearing only underwear, and cicada-thin gauze draped over their shoulders. If the wildness of the demon guards could satisfy the Empress' sense of security. However, the powerful magical waves emanating from the maids with mysterious glowing patterns on their bodies deeply attracted the Queen's attention. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.